he came out of the Umayyad Masjid one day, and he said he went to the grocery. He went to the grocery to the market, and said he picked out with real care. He picked out all the apples that had started to go rotten. All the apples. You know when you look at it and you think, oh, this got a little brown patch here, or this bit's got a little hole in it. I'll leave that one. I'll take the nice one. Sheikh Abdul Rahman Shaghuri picked out all the ones that had started to go rotten, all the ones that had started to spoil. He took them, he bought them, and he picked it out with as much care as we would pick out the good apples. He took them home, and then he cut the rotten bits out and he ate the rest. And Sheikh Noor asked him, why did you do this? And he said, because I know that no one will pick these apples. No one will take these apples. But the merchant is selling them, the fruit seller is selling them. So he will lose money because he's bought these apples, but he can't sell them. He will either lose money or he will end up throwing them away and wasting them. So to save him from both of those two things, he said 90% of this apple is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a perfectly good apple. So I just buy those apples, I take them, I cut it out and I eat them. And that's a really small thing. That's a really small thing. But what does it express of the character of that person? Oh, bless you. I didn't even know what this was. What does that express of the character of the person? The amount of consideration that he has. How much he is thinking about his relationship with Allah and about other people's relationship with Allah in something as trivial as what fruit he's buying. This is how the character of the Prophet ﷺ manifests in his followers, in those who have adopted the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And by the way, that's what a teacher does. That's what a murabbi does. Murabbi, a person who guides others. They take the bad apples that no one else wants. They take them into their own place. They cut out their flaws, and then the rest of it becomes worthwhile of its purpose. They cut out the flaws of the person to make them worthy of their purpose. That's what a teacher does. That is what tarbiyah is. That is what education is. Help them to remove the things that are negative, their negative things, the things that prevent them from achieving their purpose, which is the worship of Allah, and then allowing them to fulfill that purpose. Okay? This particular chapter, have we got the projector on, guys? This particular this particular slide is benefactor of the poor. That was a Freudian slip, by the way, because this could be a chapter. Each of these slides could be a chapter, and in fact, in this book is a chapter. And I said that it was at the beginning of this little digression, my one digression for today, hopefully. We might have to do one digression per lesson for this one. But at the beginning of this, I said that it was a little joke because it's the title of Khaja Habib Nawaz, the benefactor of the poor. But the reason he was called that, the reason that great spiritual master was called Gharib Nawaz, is because he perfectly and completely manifested the sunnah of prophetic generosity. Not merely generosity with wealth, but generosity of spirit, generosity with his time, generosity with his consideration. And that's what real generosity is. It is an expansive attribute. Okay? So, the Prophet ﷺ was very much, I think we covered this last week, or I mentioned it briefly last week, he was the prophet to the poor. Some of his very first followers were the poor. In fact, this is the reason that some of the Quraysh, the great and good of the Quraysh, didn't want to believe in him. It was the reason also that other prophets experienced this as well. So Shu'aib alayhi salam, who was one of the Arab prophets, when he asked his people why they were rejecting him, they said, well, when we look and we see that you are only followed by the weak and the poor. It is only the weak and the poor that follow you. So why should we follow you? Okay? That you might argue, and people have argued, that there is a Marxist reading of the Sunnah. Yeah, the Sunnah is about class struggle. Okay? That's a very, very partial reading of the Sunnah, but yeah, it's there. Okay? Would the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I ask you, list? Would the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam have been a capitalist had he been around today? Yeah? Would he have been a socialist? Which is closer to the prophetic, which is closer to the prophetic, but none of them encompass the prophetic personality, but which is closer. Okay? So, we see the Prophet ﷺ was the prophet of the poor. Meaning what? Not just that he gave to the poor, but that he accepted their invitations. He would eat with them. He would accept gifts from them. I mentioned this, that this is slightly counterintuitive. Why would you accept gifts from people who are poor? Because when someone is giving you something, and to refuse it, even for a good reason, to refuse it might hurt them. They might think, oh, this is not something. This is something that doesn't. That's something that it's not good enough to give. Right? There was this when I was growing up. There was this lovely Christian hymn actually that we used to sing growing up. And I remember it was in the bleak midwinter. It's not a very old one. It's from the 18th century or something. But one of the lines of that was they'd spoken about the three kings came with gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and all that kind of stuff. Then this line then was, "What can I give you, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. What can I give you? Give my heart." Okay? And often, when a person comes to you, especially a poor person is coming to you with a gift, what they are presenting to you is their heart. Okay? And this is the reason that the Prophet ﷺ would not refuse a gift. But what he would do is replace that gift with something better. He would give a gift in exchange. And that gift would be more than what that person gave to him. Okay? Yeah. Because it's not the noble character, but yeah. Does it mean that we have to come to the standard of how to actually take more benefit from the Holy Spirit's character? It's got the assumption that you're going to come with, so you've got a good character, and then it's going to be kind of. This is a very interesting idea. So the Prophet did not say, "I have come to instill good character." He said, "Illa li utammima makarim al-akhlaq." I have come to complete noble character. And the idea, therefore, yes, that implies that there is an element of good character that people already have. And this is something very beautiful. Thank you for bringing that up. It's a very good point. Something very beautiful about the way of the Prophet ﷺ, how he would teach, how he would do the tarbiyah. He would start with the person's strengths and build on those strengths. This is something that we see through the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, that he would always acknowledge the goodness of a person. He would always acknowledge the things that they were doing well, and he would use those things as a stepping stone. He would also recognize that not everyone was the same. He wasn't trying to make Uthman into Umar, and he wasn't trying to make Umar into Uthman. This isn't, a cookie cutter Islam. Everyone is different. I was at a meeting yesterday of a symposium, actually on human rights in Islam, which is a fascinating discussion. But the person that was presenting, this chap is he's an academic, but he's a Dutch convert to Islam. And there's about 30, 40 ulama there, and we were having various discussions. He was presenting this very good paper that he had written, and halfway through, he just totally casually just dropped the F-bomb. I mean, just like that. So I kind of quietly took him to one side after. I said, mate, I won't say his name. None of you will know him, but I said, just a little, the F-bomb, That's a really serious swear word. I mean, that's not like saying damn. What's that? That's a really serious swear word, yeah. And so it's just. He said, "Oh yeah, I know." I said, "Okay, why do you use it then?" And he said, "No, you see, I'm Dutch. This is just how we are. You know, this is just how we are. This is being Dutch. You know, I just don't give a." I just had to start laughing at that point. This is a really sincere guy. But I said, okay, you be you. You do you. Yeah? Just be aware of the effect it will have on other people. There will be people who, you know, maybe not in this group here because they all know you fairly well, but that you're giving a talk or whatever, you're trying to get a point across. There may be people who will not listen to all of the good things that you have to say because you drop the F-bomb. Okay, so just be aware of it. He said, "No, thank you. That's good advice, and I accept what you're saying." He said, "Look, you want to do something, and you want to do something that's really good. It's a great initiative. Don't spoil it because you feel the need to be Dutch. I'm sure there are lots of other ways to be Dutch." Okay, so, but you see this even in the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sahaba were human beings, and they were very different from each other. I've mentioned to you about the Bedouins before. The Prophet ﷺ did not try to make the Bedouins un-Bedouin. Okay? He didn't say, "Oh, no, you have to," when that person came to him and said, "Oi, you know, or whatever." He said, no, you're not supposed to address me like that. That's, you know, now, to be fair, if one of you came to me and said, "Oi, you, got a question." Yeah, at some point, maybe not initially, but at some point I'd say, it's not how you address a teacher. It's not how you talk to a teacher. The Prophet ﷺ, when meeting that person initially, he wouldn't. Why? Because that was their nature. It didn't stop them from being good people. There were aspects of their character that could be, that they had great character in certain ways. Very, very hospitable, incredibly loyal people, etc., etc. Those things he would develop. He would leave the other things for later on. And that's very good advice for whoever you are dealing with, including children, when you're raising children, that perfect their already noble characters. Yeah? Learn your children's fitrah. How do you learn your children's natures? You be with your children, you play with your children, and you have that loving relationship with them. What you do in that first period of their lives is you are learning about them. And you are therefore learning the best way to help them, the best way to educate them and develop them. And that's the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So let's take a look at some of these, inshallah. So the Prophet ﷺ, who said that he would go, he would visit people and so forth. So his perfect kindness and concern for anyone who asked him about the religion. Abu Rifa'a went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "O Messenger," while he was giving a sermon, and said, "O Messenger of Allah, a stranger has come asking about his religion, for he does not know what his religion is." The Messenger of Allah came to me. He left his sermon. A chair with iron-coated legs was brought. The Messenger of Allah sat on it, and he began to teach me that which Allah had taught him. Then he finished, and he returned to his sermon and finished it. He's giving a class. Someone comes and says, too advanced for me, I don't know anything. The Prophet ﷺ left the class, said, "You guys wait," left the class, taught that person what they needed to know. When he was satisfied, they were satisfied. Then he came back and finished the class off. Okay? A man came to him. Bukhari narrates it. Anas said, once we were sitting with the Prophet ﷺ in the mosque. A man entered riding a camel. Like he drove into the mosque. This is basically, he drove into the mosque. Yeah? Which he made to kneel down in the mosque, and then he tied it. He said to the people, "Which of you is Muhammad?" The Prophet ﷺ was sitting there, and he said, this fair-skinned man here, this is Muhammad, or this radiant man here is Muhammad. The man said to him, "Son of Abdul Muttalib." Okay, the Prophet ﷺ answered him. The man said, "I will ask you strong questions. Don't get angry with me." The Messenger of Allah ﷺ patted him gently and said, "Ask about whatever occurs to you." He said, "I ask you by your Lord and by the Lord of all those before you. Did Allah send you to all humanity?" The Prophet ﷺ replied, by Allah, yes. Muslim's narration continues. The man said, so who created the heavens? The Prophet ﷺ said, Allah. Who created the earth? Allah. Who raised the mountains and placed within them what they contain? Allah. Then the man said, by the one who created the heavens and the earth and raised the mountains and placed within them what he placed, did Allah send you? The Prophet ﷺ said, by Allah, yes. Then the man said, I ask you by Allah, did Allah command you to pray 5 times every day and night? By Allah, yes. Then he said, I ask you by Allah, did Allah command you to fast this month of the year? By Allah, yes. I ask you by Allah, did Allah command you to take charity from the rich and divide it amongst the poor? Yes. And then there was another narration he asked about pilgrimage as well. Then the man said, I believe in what you have brought. I am a messenger to those in my charge from my people. I am Dhimam ibn Tha'laba, the brother of Bani Sa'ad ibn Bakr. And so he accepted Islam in that way. So here you have the Prophet, how the Prophet ﷺ deals with people. Bayhaqi narrates the narration of Najashi came to the Prophet, the delegation of Najashi came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he began to serve them. Now imagine this. It's a Christian delegation from the Najashi. The Prophet ﷺ, both out of his humility but also out of gratitude for what the Najashi had done, the Abyssinian king who had sheltered the first Muslim exiles had done, he began to serve them. His companion said to him, Ya Rasulullah, leave it, we will look after them. The Prophet ﷺ said, they were generous to our companions. I would like to repay them. He would repay one good turn with another. Okay? So for example, let's give a few narrations here. Sometimes you may ask, how might you repay someone who does something good for you? And sometimes you can't. And you can't do anything material. The answer is to make dua for them. Look at this from the Prophet ﷺ. The Messenger of Allah asked for some water to be brought. So I brought him a cup of water. There was a single hair in the cup, so I took the hair out. In response to that, the Prophet ﷺ said, O Allah, for what he has done, make him beautiful. The narrator said, I saw that companion when he was 90 years old. His beard did not contain a single white hair. Okay? So at the very, Allah Akbar. Ibn Ka'ab once said, when I was staying with the Prophet ﷺ, I brought him water for his ablution and other things he needed. He said to me, Sal. In response, ask. Ask for what you want. This is the person who brought him water to make wudu. He didn't carry a mountain and bring it to him. Alright? Ask for whatever you want. Ask for whatever you want. Rabi'a said, okay, I want your company in paradise. Prophet ﷺ said, would you ask for anything other than this? Anything else? And he says, no. Nope, that's all I want. The Prophet ﷺ then replied, in that case, assist me by performing much prostration. Make the dua, but help yourself, pray. Yeah, perform the prayers. He would miss his companions and he would ask about them. Right? If the Prophet ﷺ didn't see one of his brethren for 3 days, he would ask about him. If he was away, he would pray for him. If he was in town, he would go to him. If he was sick, he would visit him. This is the Prophet. We'll come across some more of these as we go through. But let's take a look at. I'll just go through it. So this is we've done the character about the Prophet and how he was with the poor. We'll move on now to the next slide, which is the valor of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I don't have a copy of. Let me just read this out. For those of you that have the soliloquy of the full moon, there are 2 very beautiful chapters in there on the outward characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ and one on the inward characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ. So I'll just show you what I mean. Let me just read. This is a. I mean, it's part of the work, but it's a poem about the character of the Prophet ﷺ. You cannot know the secret truth of his most perfect heart. These few words of description fade away when held to him. His beauty was but a reflection of his inward state, a character so lofty that unjustly I narrate. Perhaps you wonder why I have spent time to illustrate his countenance and beauty. Well, what lover does not yearn to know of their beloved, see his visage in their eyes, and now you see him fall in love with his spirit sublime. He ever was the greatest mercy sent unto the worlds. No man or woman came upon him except that they left in gladness at his goodness with their hearts and minds content. Bedouin who came with empty packs did leave without whatever he possessed upon their backs. No child did pass except they laughed in mirth and merriment and played with him. Some climbed on him and were perfumed with scent. The mere grains of soil and sand did find with him respite. The servants of the merciful upon the earth tread light. Has news reached you about the bird who unto him complained, lamenting of her stolen eggs in anguished woe and pain? For her into the desert he set out to them regain. And have you heard of how in battle's march he came across a mother with her pups, concerned that she not be distraught or fearful, he stationed guards and changed his army's course? Or of the camel so mistreated who did come to weep, the Prophet called its owner saying, this camel that you keep is from Allah, so fear him and cause this beast no grief. His way with all creation was as one not touched by need, yet when he stood before his Lord, no other would he heed. He passed his nights in penitent devotion, lost in prayer, until his feet would swell and crack, when he was made aware and asked why one so pure and sinless felt such need to plead and weep. He answered, should I not a thankful servant be? Tears and sorrowful concern was for mankind, that they might live in peace in this world and at end of times. When hope seemed lost and always blocked, his faith would never fail. He'd place his trust in God alone. When cornered in the cave, beset by foes, he said to still his friends' concern, don't grieve, not two are we, for God is with us. Thus descended peace. And when 'twas time to stand his ground, his valor knew no peer. Where battle fiercest raged, the brave would shelter seek with him. He needed neither sword nor spear, mere dust would turn the tide, when cast from hand of him who fought with angels by his side. Yet when the victory was at hand, the conquered found that he was both the messenger of battle and of clemency. If one held out his hand to him, his hand he'd not refuse, nor would he then withdraw until themselves they would excuse. How honored were his fellowship, he made them feel at ease. He'd sit among them and they would converse on what they pleased. These blessed companions weren't repressed, and never were they harsh. Together they'd sing poetry with him, they'd joke and laugh, relaxed and spreading joy. The ever smiling was his name, that followers may learn his ways, good character attain. He would not dominate in speech or interrupt affairs, but when he spoke, no other spoke, or listening with care. 'Twas said by them, the Prophet of Allah did never greet or speak except that he smiled, embracing us when we did meet. For he ever was concerned for his community and friends. Whenever a companion was absent, he would ask of his well-being and visit him, and in the times of night, he'd miss these friends and listen for Quran that they'd recite. There was not one more just than him, and greater was he still. When one was just to him, there was not one more just than him, and greater still was he. When one was just to him, he'd answer more excellently. Most patient was he verily, and filled with taintless hope. Al-Ta'if, stoned and bleeding when he sought to grant relief, the angels would have caused the mountains crush the land beneath. But said he, nay, perhaps may come an offspring of belief. So know his outward form was but a mirror glass reflecting, an inner beauty of perfection widely radiating. And in this, says the moon, because it's the soliloquy of the full moon, and in this may I call a claim, for I am but a glass that holds upon its clear face the light of one who was, the height of every brilliance, whom no one did surpass, in mercy or in majesty or beauty of the heart. And so may you by this remembrance burnish rusty heart, by love of him to sanctify your soul and make it shine, that you may hold the faintest scintilla of light divine. That's the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we'll go from there to look at prophetic valor. He was Rasulul Malahim, the Prophet of fierce battles. And this is summed up by this verse of Quran, وَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي. Allah says to the believers, don't fear them, don't fear your enemies. Have fear in me alone. I remember one of my friends once, he just had a baby, and he said to me, you know, I'm going to raise my son not to be afraid of anything but God. Not to be afraid of me, and not to be afraid of anything else except for God. And I said to him, you will really have raised a courageous person. Okay? Because that's what courage is. The Prophet ﷺ lived, let us not forget, in very, very dangerous times. Okay? The Prophet ﷺ had a target pointed on his back. Okay? If the Sayyidina Ali said, the Prophet ﷺ had the soundest of hearts and the most courageous. His speech was the most truthful of speech. He was the gentlest of people and the kindest of them in companionship. If the Sahaba were ever exposed to danger, the Prophet ﷺ would rush to their aid and protect them. Anas said that the people of Medina one night were frightened by a loud sound that they heard. Some people went out then, some people hid, and some people went towards that sound. When they were walking to see what it was, they found the Prophet ﷺ of Allah on his way back. He had already gone to check what it was, found that it was nothing, and was on his way back already. So he had gone before them, before anyone else went. He had gone. Now we don't know what this sound was, whether it was a natural thing or whether it was a supernatural thing, we don't know. But the point is, the Prophet ﷺ had gone out before anyone else had gone out to check what it was, to make sure nobody was in danger. Okay. Whenever the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were met with misfortune and surrounded by danger, they would take refuge by his noble side and seek the shelter of his impenetrable protection. Sayyidina Ali said, when times became hard and eyes became red, we would seek the protection of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. So no one would be closer to the enemy than he. On the day of Badr, we sought the Prophet ﷺ's shelter, and he was the closest of us to the enemy. On that day, he was the bravest of people in the face of the enemy. Bara ibn Azib has this amazing narration. The brave man is one who was close to the Prophet ﷺ during the battle. Because the Prophet ﷺ would be at the thickest part, at the thick of the battle. As I said, where battle fiercest raged, the brave would shelter seek with him. Okay? And on the day of Hunayn, and this really was of all the battles that the Prophet ﷺ fought, this was the courage, the martial courage, as in the warrior's courage of the Prophet ﷺ was most clearly manifest at the Battle of Hunayn. Okay? This was fought after the conquest of Mecca. So Mecca had been conquered. Okay? And then the city of Ta'if, they heard that the people of Ta'if had gathered all their sort of allied tribes, and there was an army of, I don't know however many thousands strong, that was marching towards Mecca to defeat, the believers. And the Muslims marched out, and they met them at a place called Hunayn. It was a mountain pass. Now the commander of the pagan army was a very, very good warrior. And he had laid an ambush for the Muslims. Okay, so I won't go into detail about the battle, but the point is that when the armies of Hunayn, now who was in the army of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Okay, all those 10,000 that accompanied the Prophet ﷺ to Mecca didn't participate in this battle. Remember that there wasn't actually a battle fought in Mecca, right? You had the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ. Who I mean by the Sahaba here are those who had been with the Prophet ﷺ throughout. So that's about 1,500 men. Okay, there was a census done at the time of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and the adult male believers numbered 1,500. Right? And those are the Ashabul Ridwan, those who took the pledge under the tree of Hudaybiyah. There were those, that core of 1,500. Then there were thousands of others. Some of them, the Meccans, who had been all the time fighting against the Prophet, who had joined the army, and they had gone. When the armies of Hunayn ambushed the believers and mounted the surprise attack, their first onslaught was so sudden and so severe that the Muslim armies crumbled, and there was a rout. They just fled. They just fled. Okay? These are all the new people, right? They thought, oh, well, if the angels have protected him and, God has been with him and he's managed to conquer Mecca, well, we'll be okay. They'll went with him. But they weren't strong in their belief yet. So when the going got tough, they got going in the other direction. And what you then had at Hunayn, and this is quite cinematic actually. There are two mountains on either side, and then there's a valley in the middle. Okay? The armies of Hunayn came down the mountain slopes, right, and assaulted the Muslim ranks. The Muslim ranks split and ran. Okay? Until all you had was the prophets of was the Muslim army in full retreat. Okay? And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says this: Ana nabiyyu la kadhib. Ana ibn Abdul Muttalib. He stood up in his reins. He stood up in his stirrups. Okay, so he wasn't on a horse, he was on a mule, but he stands up on the mule, right? And he says, Ana nabiyyu la kadhib. I am the Prophet. This is no lie. Ana ibn Abdul Muttalib. I am the grandson of Abdul Muttalib. Right? And that is effectively the Prophet ﷺ saying, to me, O believers, to me. And the Prophet ﷺ alone advances towards the people of Hunayn. Advances toward in the face of the army of Hunayn. His closest companions gather around him. And there were 300 that formed a line. They formed a line and they stopped, those 300, with the Prophet ﷺ, having identified himself, mind you. Having identified himself. There is a reason in chess that you protect the king. Right? There's a reason you protect the king in chess. You don't put the king where the pawns are. Because if the king goes, the game's over. And if the Prophet ﷺ dies, it's game over. And the Prophet ﷺ is right in the middle of this, right in the thick of it, having called all the attention to himself. Right? He stands there alone. Then the companions come to join him, the 300 companions. Then the 1,500 Sahaba come, and that holds the armies of Hunayn until the rest of the believers come back again. The rest of the army comes back again. So this is the bravery, the martial courage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so we've seen here the slide says, he would walk alone without a guard in the midst of his enemies. He would not seek assistance from the polytheists against the Meccans, even though he was greatly outnumbered. Yeah, there is this lovely narration that he did not have contempt for a poor man because of his poverty, and he did not fear a king because of his power. So people were people to him at the end of the day. Okay? So Abdullah Sirajuddin says, he stood firm on the day of Hunayn and strengthened the hearts of his companions and approached the ranks of the enemy on his mule, neither concerned nor hesitant, and said with complete certainty, I am the Prophet, this is no lie, I am the son, I am the scion of Abdul Muttalib. That is to say, I am not a liar who will be put to flight. I am the truthful Prophet. God is my assister. God is my aid. I am completely sure of his might, of his power, and his assistance. Yeah.
He also takes the risk of some from the newly decorations who weren't England who wanted to assassinate him.
Yes. Yes. So this is actually not a narration about the courage of the Prophet ﷺ, but since we're talking about Hunayn, the other wonderful incident that happened at Hunayn is the narration of Fadala. Fadala was a Meccan who was a munafiq, right? So he had entered Islam. He had come on the campaign to Taif. It didn't happen at Taif. It happened around the time around the time of Hunayn. But during this battle, I should say, when the battle had quieted down, because battles do this, they're not like you see in the movies. They ebb and flow. People get tired, right? Battles sort of ebb and flow. So during one of the ebbs in the battle, Fadala sneaks up behind the Prophet ﷺ, knife in hand. He finds the Prophet ﷺ all alone on the battlefield. Okay? And he sneaks up behind him. Now he's an ally, right? So why would the Prophet suspect anything? Fully intending to assassinate him, stab him in the back and assassinate him. Okay? And he says, as he approaches the Prophet ﷺ, as he's coming close, the Prophet turns around. And he looks at him and he smiles. And he says to him, what was that you were just thinking, Fadala? Right? And Fadala said, no, nothing. I was just thinking about how I need to protect you in the battle. Okay? The Prophet smiles and he places his blessed hand on Fadala's chest like this. And Fadala says that before his hand touched my chest, there was no one in the world I hated more than the Prophet ﷺ. And when his hand left my chest, there was no one I loved more than the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ completely changed his heart. But changed the heart of who? Changed the heart of someone who an instant before that was completely intent on assassinating him. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ, who was completely unafraid. I'm going to tell you a story here about my dad. To illustrate a little bit of this point. So my dad did medicine in Romania. Because of a whole very complicated series of circumstances, he did his medical degree in Romania. And he told me once that when I said I'm going to psychiatry, he said, I did a bit of psychiatry once. So he says that he said once I was in the psych ward. Okay, I was in the asylum basically. And he said this guy comes up to me. He's completely mad. He comes and he is huge. He comes up to me. He grabs me. Two hands, lifts me up like this, off my feet, and says, you know how strong I am? He said, I am so strong, I can throw you out of this window. 5th floor. 5th floor. What does my dad do? Right? And I'd love to tell you that my dad must have made this must be a tall tale, my dad. But knowing my dad, I can believe it. He said to him, cool as a cucumber. He said to him, that's not being strong. I'll tell you what's really strong. If you can take me downstairs and throw me up into this window, that's strength. And the guy goes, yes, and off he goes down the stairs and takes my dad, dragging my dad down the stairs until he came across some orderlies. And then my dad says, hey, grab this guy, please. This is coolness under pressure. That's coolness under pressure. Okay? So think about this. Think about the coolness it required, because this act of fadala, this act that relates to fadala, was not just an act of mercy, it was an act of coolness under pressure. Okay? There were times that the Prophet ﷺ was protected, okay? Divinely protected. But there are other times when, and there were people who would come to, Abu Lahab, for example, at one point came to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ. And this was in Mecca, and as he approached him, he suddenly, there were people there who knew it was, and he froze, and this look of absolute terror on his face. He ran away, and people asked him, "What?" He's co-conspirators asked him, "What happened to you?" He said, "Did you not see that terrifying beast that leapt out of the shadows between us?" And people said, "You're going mad. Muhammad has bewitched you." Yeah, so Allah sent protection for the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, but the other great incident here is when he went to the Bani Ghassan, who were a northern tribe, and the Muslims had gone out on a campaign. So what would happen in Medina is Medina was under siege effectively. Okay, it was not just from the Meccans, but the Meccans had allies who were tribal allies, and those tribal allies, they would incite the tribal allies to launch a raid, for example, against some of the Muslims, maybe some of the outlying areas or whatever. This is kind of the way Arabia worked. So what you will find is you will hear sometimes that in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, in the 10 years of the Medinan period, there were 80 battles. No, there weren't 80 battles. There were 80 campaigns. There were 80 expeditions. Because what would happen often is that the Prophet ﷺ would receive word, not just from Jibreel, but from informants and people coming and stuff, or and so forth, that people were gathering. An army was gathering, a raiding party was gathering. And what he would do is he would either send out a party preemptively to go and meet them, right? Or he would plan strategies. So at one of these times, he heard there was a big army gathering, and he gathered together a group of the companions, and they went out. And when the news came that the Muslims are marching out of Medina to us, the tribes decided that discretion was the better part of valor and just dispersed. Okay? So the Muslims didn't fight anyone. Okay, they got to where they was, they saw that nothing is going on, they came back again. On the way back, it was very, very hot. This is a desert. So they found a few trees, and they each slept under, a few of them slept under one tree to get a little bit of shade. And the Prophet ﷺ was completely by himself, under a tree by himself. Right? Those same tribes that had split, the main instigators of that, had followed the Muslim army and were spying on them. And what they saw, they found the Prophet ﷺ was completely alone during the middle of the day. One of them had snuck down to that place until he came and he stood right over the Prophet ﷺ, sword drawn. Right? So his sword is like literally all he has to do is that. And the Prophet ﷺ's eyes open. The Prophet ﷺ's eyes open. He looks at him. And this person says to him, he does the bad guy thing, right? He monologues. So he says, "Who will protect you from me now? Who will protect you from me now?" And the Prophet looks at him, doesn't even blink. He says, "Allah." That guy had a stroke, in a nutshell. He had a stroke then and there. He became completely paralyzed. The sword fell from his hand. He fell to the floor, completely unable to move. A stroke. The Prophet ﷺ stands up, takes the same sword, holds it over him, and says, "Who will protect you from me now? Who will protect you from me now?" And this man says to him, who, let's be clear, was an assassin. Was an assassin. Right? "Who will protect you from me now?" And the man says, "Mercy." The Prophet ﷺ puts the sword down, reaches out his hand. The man's paralysis goes away. at the touch of the Prophet's hand, pulls him to his feet, gives him his sword back, and says, go and tell your people what you see. Go and tell your people what you see. I said to you guys that Jamal comes from Jalal. That real softness, kindness, mercy, and so forth come from a place of power. And this was the power that the Prophet had. This trust, this courage is born out of an absolute trust in God. It is exactly the same courage, same root as his generosity. So his courage in battle, or when facing danger, came from exactly the same place as his courage in generosity. Because to give requires courage. What did that man who the Prophet gave everything to, what did he say? Believe in Muhammad, he gives like a man who does not fear tomorrow. Does not fear tomorrow. Where does that lack of fear come from? It comes from an absolute trust in God. That no matter what, God's will be done. It doesn't mean Allah will protect me. That's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. It is that I trust, not that God will protect me, but I trust that God's will be done. Whatever God has intended will come about. Whether it means your death, whether it means you live. There were companions who were incredibly courageous, who were martyred in awful ways. In awful ways. Allah did not send an angel to protect them. Khubayb, for example, was a companion of the Prophet ﷺ, captured by by some of the disbelievers, and there was actually one of the mothers of those who had died in Uhud, and Khubayb, who had fought at Uhud, had killed her son at Uhud, and she swore that she would drink wine out of his skull. Okay, that was the oath that she had taken. I will drink wine out of his skull. Okay? Khubayb is there with 2 or 3 companions. Some people say, oh, we want you to teach us Islam. The Prophet sent them 2 or 3 companions. It was a trap, it was a trick. They were captured, they were tortured. One was killed immediately. Khubayb was tortured awfully. He was tied to a stake and he was tortured. Okay? And they said to him, in the midst of that torture, would you not prefer that Muhammad was in your place right now? And he said to them, I would prefer, it is more, this torture that I'm undergoing is more beloved to me than for a single thorn to prick the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah? And so we're going to kill you. He says, I have one request. This is the last man, the last request. What is it? I want to pray. They untied him, he prayed 2 rakats. That is called Salatul Maut, the prayer of execution. It's become a sunnah. If you're facing execution, you need 2 rakats. Okay? He prayed that they killed him. What was the oath the woman swore? To drink wine out of his skull. So when they were going to mutilate his body and take his skull out, what happened? Allah sent a swarm of bees. And the swarm of bees swarmed around his body. So they couldn't get close to his body. And when the swarm of bees dissipated, the body was no longer there. Now just pause for a second, and what is the cynical part of you thinking? What is the cynical part of you thinking right now? The other part of you is thinking, mashallah. What is the cynical part thinking? Allah, couldn't you have sent that swarm of bees half an hour earlier? To do exactly the same thing, and to disappear Khubayb, and save him. That was not what Allah had agreed for him. Courage is not, courage is not, guys, like putting yourself in cheat mode on a video game. So nothing can do anything to you. And you can carry on. Yeah? You know, when I was not very young, but I had a 6-month period when I was about 18, 19 years old, when I played Doom. I don't know if you guys ever heard this game. This is a game called Doom. And I learned the cheat mode. Someone told me the cheat mode. And so I would go against all these horrible monsters, the big monsters with a pistol. And I would use a pistol. And it would take about half an hour to go, pistol, ding, 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 like that, you know, when you would use these big major weapons. But nothing could harm me. What's the problem? This is not courage. Oh, Allah will protect me is not courage. I don't know what Allah has in store for me, but I trust Him nonetheless. That's courage. Who was the first martyr of Islam? Sumayya. Yeah? Sumayya was the mother of Ammar ibn Yasir. Good that you know that. Alhamdulillah. Sumayya was the mother of Ammar ibn Yasir. Yeah? And she was the first martyr of Islam. Alright? They were a very poor and weak family. They didn't have the connections. So they were persecuted. And her husband Yasir, Sumayya stood firm. Yasir didn't. They pressured them, they tortured them, and demanded that they recant their faith. Sumayya refused and was horribly killed. Yasir said, okay, fine, I don't believe in Muhammad. And they let him go. And then he came to the Prophet and said, actually, I can't, was it, I'm getting the story wrong. Was it, I think, no, in fact, both of them stood firm. But Ammar didn't. But Ammar said, yeah, no, it's okay, I don't believe. Yeah? His parents were killed, his elderly parents, mind you. Okay, so the first martyr of Islam was an elderly woman who killed in front of him. And Ammar comes broken-hearted to the Prophet. First because of his parents, but also because he relented. Yeah? He gave up. And that's when Allah revealed this verse of Quran that says, if a believer utters words of unbelief under duress or in fear of their life, but their heart is content with Iman, it is forgiven. Okay? So these people had great courage. And remember that they weren't to know what was going to happen the next day. Right? And this courage comes from this courage comes from trust in God. Okay? The other great story about the Prophet and his, we know there are very few people that we know that were actually killed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, there's only one that I can think of offhand, and that is the right account. I think it's got it here. Yes, Ubay ibn Khalaf. Okay, so I'll read this to you. So now, just a quick thing about the Battle of Uhud. So the Battle of Uhud had three phases. The first phase was where the Muslims basically, defeated the Meccan army and drove them from the field. Okay. The second phase was when Khalid ibn Walid, had held his troops in reserve, okay, found a way around the Muslim ranks to attack them from the back. All right, and sowed a whole lot of disarray in the Muslim ranks. The third phase was when the Meccan army then saw this happening and returned to the battle, and then the battle was fought to a stalemate. So the first part of the battle, the Muslims won. The second part of the battle, the Muslims lost. The third part of the battle was a stalemate, basically. So 1-1, lost 1, drew 1, effectively, in that battle. But in that third part, which was the fiercest part of the battle, this is when the Prophet ﷺ was completely under siege, because many of the Muslims the Muslims were so disorientated by the counterattack that a lot of them fled. There were those who was, and the rumor was also spread that the Prophet ﷺ had been killed. Who had actually been killed? Mus'ab ibn Umair, quite right. So Mus'ab ibn Umair, right, who was a very handsome Sahaba, who was known to look like the Prophet ﷺ. He was the one who was sent to Medina as an envoy a year before the Prophet made Hijrah. But he was actually killed, and the person who killed him thought that he killed the Prophet ﷺ. Or maybe he just lied about it. He started shouting out, Muhammad is dead, Muhammad is dead, I had killed Muhammad. Now, because things are now so split, the battle is being fought all over the place. All right? The Muslims lost hope completely. When they heard that the Prophet had been killed, they completely lost hope. Some of them fled to Medina. Some of them just sat down, were cut down, just sitting on the floor. They were so distraught at what had happened. And then the Prophet saw what was happening and again said, took off his helmet and said, I am Muhammad, messenger of Allah, and so forth. What happened at that point was then, again, the attacks all focused on the Prophet. The army pretty much was gunning for the Prophet. And this is when this story comes. So, Ubay, this is the story of Ubay ibn Khalaf. So, he was mounted, the Prophet was on foot, Ubay was mounted on a horse. He had said to the Prophet on the day of Badr, when he had ransomed his son, he said to the Prophet I have a horse that I feed every day, many measures of corn. I'm preparing this horse to ride on, so that when I find you in the next battle, I will slay you. Means I'm getting this horse ready from now, yeah, and I'm coming for you, basically. The Prophet ﷺ says, if that is if Allah wills, it is I who will slay you. Okay? So, when Ubay heard the Prophet ﷺ is in this one place, he is alone, there's only a few companions around him. Okay? He charges straight for the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? Now he is a cavalryman. So he's mounted, he's effectively heavy cavalry, mounted on a horse with his lance, charging towards the Prophet ﷺ. The Muslims stand in front of the Prophet to protect him. What does the Prophet say? Stand aside. He tells them, stand aside. Do not come between me and Ubay ibn Khalaf. The Prophet ﷺ then takes a spear from Harith ibn Simma. He leapt forward with it. Ubay and the idolaters about him scattered like flies from a camel's back. The Prophet ﷺ faced Ubay, thrust the spear up into his neck, that made him sway on top of his horse. But the spear itself was only cast a glancing blow. So it was a neck, but it was like a flesh wound. Okay? Ubay swung and missed at the Prophet ﷺ, but his horse knocked the Prophet ﷺ into a ditch, basically. Right? Knocked him down into a ditch. Okay? Ubay then comes back to his own ranks, shouting, Muhammad has killed me. Muhammad has killed me. Right? They said to him, it's just a flesh wound. You're fine. Ubay replied, if what afflicts me now were to afflict all people, it would surely kill them all. Did he not say, did he not say, it is I who will slay you? Now think about this. This is Ubay ibn Khalaf. What we said about the truthfulness of the Prophet ﷺ? Yeah? Ubay said, he said he would kill me. Yeah? By Allah, had he spat at me today, he would have killed me. Had he just spat at me, he would have killed me. And Ubay died on his return to Mecca. His wound became infected and he died on the way back to Mecca. Okay? That is the one incident I know of, definitively, that the Prophet ﷺ slew someone. Why? He killed someone in battle. Why? Because he said he would. He said he would. Okay? So this was the courage of the Prophet ﷺ. But to meet a one-on-one, and remember when he told the Sahaba to stand aside, the Sahaba, and there were only about 10 of them, they were facing a cavalry charge. They were facing a cavalry charge. Okay? The Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba to stand aside, which means he was facing a cavalry charge. Yeah? And we don't know what it was that made the rest of the enemy kind of scatter, leaving only Ubay ibn Khalaf there. It may have been the angelic intervention. Yeah, but ultimately he fought that person one-on-one. Now you think, oh, he's the prophet. Remember the humanity of the prophet. When I said to you, looking at character, you remember the humanity of the prophet. At the end of the day, it was one infantryman against one cavalryman. It started off actually one infantryman against a cavalry charge, and it turned into one infantryman against one cavalry charging at him. Bear in mind, you're facing a horse in full flight. The soldier on the back of the horse doesn't actually need to do anything. They just have to run you down with the horse. The horse. And that'll be the end of you. Okay? So this is the courage of the Prophet. We'll carry on. And the reason I spend a little bit more time on that is because we do focus a lot on the compassion and the softness of the Prophet. It is important for us to know about the Prophet's martial prowess, his courage in battle, and so forth. Because one of the things that we are experiencing in our day and age is, and not just Muslims are experiencing it, but it's more broad than that, is a crisis of masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man? And this is a very important question to be able to answer, because if you don't answer this question, what you end up with is a toxic masculinity. Right? And toxic masculinity is what leads to things like domestic violence and so on and so forth. Yeah? Gang culture, for example, is toxic masculinity. It is an attempt for men to be men, but in the wrong way. Right? The modern, and it is a modern Muslim obsession with polygamy, right, is toxic masculinity. It is an attempt for men trying to be men, but in the wrong way. So what's the right way? What's the right way? There are no more wolves to chase from your door. You don't have to go out hunting to feed your family anymore. Probably earns as much as you do. Your wife is likely to be more educated than you are and have a higher earning potential than you. Now what? And I'm not even going to attempt to give the answer here, but it's something that needs to be thought about. What does it mean to be a man? Because وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنْثَى, women. And women are not like men. We are biologically different from each other. We are psychologically different from each other. Men are from Mars. They are different. But how can we be in those different roles and manifest that beautiful character in those roles? What does it mean to have courage? What's sometimes called in Arabic, rajula, manliness. Yeah? You find that conceptions of manliness change as time goes on. Okay? You see this in English culture. You go from Beowulf in Old English to Lancelot in Middle English. Yeah? Beowulf is a man's man. Right? In the Old English, the Norse tales and so forth. Lancelot is a man's man in Middle England, in England of the 13th and 14th centuries. But they wouldn't recognize each other. They wouldn't recognize each other. And we need to work out what it means to be a man. Yeah? And you have to go back to the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Being a man is not lording it over your wife and children because they are the only people that you now have power over. That is explicitly not what it means to be a man. In one of the beautiful long hadiths, it's called the hadith of Zar'a, okay, or the hadith of the 11 women, okay, and it's actually it comes under the chapter. We'll mention it, but I'm just going to talk about it because it's here. When we get to it, then you know we've covered it. But it's about the what's called in the Shama'il works Bab Thamarun Nabi, and Thamar is night conversation. Right, it's kind of it's chill out conversation with your family, basically. And there's this narration about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by the way, it is disliked to engage in frivolous conversation after Isha. It is makruh to engage in frivolous conversation after you've read Isha. After Isha, you should go to bed. That's the general rule. Isha should be the last thing that you do before you go to sleep, unless you are remembering Allah and so on and so forth. And remember, I learned this in my 20-year career as a sort of student of knowledge. I learned this relatively late, okay? But I remember that my sheikh used to say, we used to go for dhikr on a Thursday night, and he used to say, he always used to say this, because what would happen is there would be a dhikr, right? And then we'd all come downstairs, and then there'd be a second dhikr, right? So everyone would be Allah, 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 right? Then they'd come downstairs. Did you hear what happened to so and so? So there is the post-dhikr conversation, the post-dhikr debrief. And he always used to say, and I always used to see this with my sheikh, that he would finish the dhikr, he would greet people, he would come and he would make salam to the women. If he needed to see anyone, he would see them, but if not, he would get straight in the car and go home. Yeah? And he always used to tell us, don't stand around chatting, talking nonsense. You've just spent an hour remembering God. Don't spoil it now, because you'll end up in gossip and this and that and the other. Go home, think about your Lord, contemplate Allah, go to sleep with the memory of the dhikr as the strongest memory that you have. That's the last memory that you have. Yeah? And this is exactly what he was saying, that frivolous conversation after Isha is disliked. Okay? We have this hadith of the Prophet of these kind of gentle, trivial conversations he would engage with his spouses before they went to bed. And this narration, one of the fascinating things about the narration is how long it is. Because basically, Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa is telling the Prophet a story. And it's a story about these 11 women. And it's about how these 11 women got together one day and they began to complain about their husbands. In a nutshell, this is what the story is about. The 11 women who were talking about their husbands. All right? And the hadith is famous for a number of reasons. One of it is the length. Right? And you've got to think about the Prophet. The Prophet says one thing right at the end. Sayyidah Aisha, the whole thing is Sayyidah Aisha talking. And it's like 3 pages long. And it's just Sayyidah Aisha talking. And she's just prattling on. I mean, that's Sayyidah Aisha, but you know what I mean? She's talking and talking and talking. And oh, this woman said that. And then that woman said this. And then there's this woman and she said that. And the Prophet is listening to her. And at the end of that hadith, he says to her, the last woman is called Zar'a. And she was married to Abu Zar'a. And she said, he treated me beautifully. And he was so wonderful. And he gave me whatever I wanted. And we had these beautiful children. They were like the light of my eyes, and this, that, and the other. And then he found a younger, prettier model. So he divorced me and he married her. Right? And that, by the way, was the most complimentary of the 11 wives. But the Prophet ﷺ says to her, at the end he says to her, I am to you like Abu Zar'a, except I will never leave you. Yeah, it means I will treat you just like Abu Zar'a treated his wife, except that I won't leave you. Yeah? Which means that he was listening. Which means he was listening all the way through. He wasn't like, yeah. It wasn't that. He was listening to all the way through. Now, one of the women says about her husband, إِذَا خَرَجَ أَسُدَ وَإِذَا دَخَلَ فَهِدَ. Which means, when he comes home, he is a leopard, and when he leaves, he is a lion. Okay, this is what she says about her husband. Right? What is she saying? Let me translate that into idiomatic English. When he's outside the house, he's a lion. When he's inside the house, he's a kitten. He's a kitten. Yeah? What does that mean? When he's at home, he is soft. He is playful. He has all of these qualities. When he goes outside, he's a big, strong, fierce man. Now, I know a sheikh, some of you will know as well, who is exactly like this. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he's exactly like this. And I know it because I know him. Okay? And I remember once, Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, the brothers, I remember he was doing a talk on marriage or something like that, and the brothers kind of said, we're all going to go for this talk on marriage, because Sheikh Muhammad, he's not like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he'll sort these women out, he'll tell them where their place is, because Sheikh Muhammad's Rajul, he's strong, I said, yeah, go come back and tell me how it was. They went, four guys came out with their tail between their legs. I said, what happened? He said, no, man, it wasn't like that. You know, you brothers need to be like this, and you brothers need to be like that, and you sisters too, huh? And you brothers need to be like this, and you brothers need to be like that, and you sisters too, huh? He said, the whole thing, 80 million of it was just scolding us. I said, this is because you see him only on the outside. You don't see what he's like inside the house. I've seen my sheikh in the house. I've seen him in the house. This came out when Sheikh Muhammad's first wife passed away. Beautiful kind of eulogy for his wife. And one of the things he spoke about was that when she was ill, if she became ill, how he would feed her. He would bring the food up to, this is when his second wife passed away from cancer. But how, in the last 2 months of her life, he would feed, and he's got students, he's got, people who are hard names and so on, but he would feed her with his own hand. To her, he would wash her, he would look after her while she was in her illness. And the astonishing thing is that people were astonished by this. And that says something. If that surprises you, then you need to look at how you understand what a man is. Because it means you've really missed the point somewhere, if that surprises you. Yeah? And this is what you learn, that when you are in the home, you are soft, you are gentle, you are understanding, you are playful, and so forth. When you are outside the home, that's when you roar. You don't meow to your boss, meow to your friends, meow to whoever it happens to be. And when you come home, if you're going to roar outside the house, not inside the house. And this is something we learn from the Prophet ﷺ, that the Prophet ﷺ was not a hippie. Okay, it wasn't flower power and let's sit in a circle and make flower and daisy chains. The Prophet ﷺ was a man. He was a man whose standard we guys, not you ladies, leave it to us, that we guys need to measure our manhood by. Okay, and on that, let's take a break, inshallah. We'll read Asr, then it's tea break. I believe there are some, I'm assuming, delicious pakoras, which are for sale. £2 whatever pack. All the money is going to the Prophet's Hand charity, feeding the homeless. So please have 2 packs each. Leave your diet today. And have two packs each. The Javed family has brought them. We much appreciate it. Jazakallah khair. Let's read our Asr, please. Let's give the Iqamah, pray Asr, and then we'll come back to it. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Barakatuh ya Allah. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله، الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وآل سيدنا محمد. تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا مولانا إنك أنت الرحيم. سمعنا وأطعنا. No, that's fine. Does he know you? How do you find the Arabic? Yeah. Yeah. Did you mention actually?
Yes, yeah, I actually, because I caught up after that. I know we got quite late on Tuesday, I was able to know.
Let me know how it goes.
When are you traveling? Is it this month, right? Also, like, I was talking to you, but it's looking like it's a lot of travel in November. I will be like, okay.
So where are you going? Oh, I see. Oh, I see. I was like, not traveling to work. It's only 1 week. I mean, for the Arabic, it's just 1 week. Which is the last week of October. And then the last week or two, or maybe or so of November, is winter break. Yeah, but at least 2 years. Yeah, enjoying it?
Yeah,
So far, so good.
lots of little rooms there.
Get yourself some. You got pakoras, well, sometimes potato, sometimes chicken. Yeah, you can. Yeah, right. Take care.
I've got quick questions for you.
Yeah.
So I think other people could perhaps benefit from maybe.
Yep.
One is that, you know, I asked you this last week about like account us having good accounts. How would you respond to, you know, we always hear good reports about the Holy Prophet's beauty. Was that beauty therefore a reflection?
Can you make the announcement for the first induction? That's really important.
Can you make the induction for first announcement?
Okay, when I must make it. When they come back.
When they come back, yeah.
You know why? Yeah, before they all leave, because you've got quite a few students out there.
You do, but I mean, that's the whole point of the group, isn't it?
Yeah, but I still have to. Some people, you know, a few people are not in the group yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we
fine.
must make that announcement. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just. Yeah. Sorry, you're saying?
So was the beauty of the Holy Prophet that was reported a reflection of his good character? Like, for example, if somebody asks me what Dr. Ross is like, I'm not going to report he's actually not a good looking man, because what you see, the beauty on the actual form is actually often a reflection of the
Yeah, I have no doubt that was the case. But what you then, yeah.
Because no one's going to actually, like, especially if you talk about the beloved, no one's even in a room full of really handsome men, no one's going to say, yeah, actually, it was really special.
Absolutely. I'm sure that is the case. What you then have, I suppose, are the if you like that subject. That's basically beauties in the eye of the beholder.
Now I was just wondering, was it actually the Holy Prophet's beauty what was reported in the year? When we read the Shema'il, for example, it's always like he looked the tallest, even though he wasn't the tallest, like in height, and his colour was perfect, sort of complexion, everything seemed to be perfect about him. But no one's ever going to report, oh, actually, yeah, he did have a mole, or he had a blister, or he did actually look.
And yet, the one defect he had on his body, which was the seal of prophethood, was absolutely commented on.
But it wasn't commented on in an ugly way, like, oh God, he had that scar.
Yeah.
It was everything that's reported about our prophet is beautiful, but of course it's going to be beautiful. Good decoration.
So what you would then do is you would look. If someone says yes, he was the most beautiful person I've ever seen. That's fine. Maybe that's your opinion. What you would then do is look at accounts or conflicting accounts of the description, any conflicts in the actual detailed accounts of the descriptions. And if you were to start to see contradictions, one says he was quite short, one says he was quite tall, yeah,
But the language.
then you can say, well, actually, maybe they're not. Oh, no. Bear in mind where the language is concerned. Yes, of course, and there is an understanding they will put that in the best way.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, you do not have accounts, for example, of people say the Prophet was taller than everybody else. The Prophet was 7 foot.
What I mean by asking this is, say, if somebody asks you, if somebody asks all of us like, what's Dr. Arsenal like, we're always going to try and describe it as your student.
You're
so
right.
honor you
You're right.
in the best possible
You're
way.
right, but why would that mean that you would describe the details of my abilities?
We will, but we will only use language that is complimentary.
Right. So what you then have
Is at no point do you ever want to undermine the beauty of our teacher, because the beauty actually that we see within you is
bring it. That's a lot of proposals.
No, I was telling her, she's like, no,
No, that's too much proposal.
I'll get a
That's like supper.
check, would you like tea?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. But you would look to see what you would look, because the question is, so what? Ultimately. Yeah.
mine is actually, you know, the beauty was actually would the creation ever said that the Holy Prophet was beautiful as well, or is it just a mistake pushing it? Because maybe if somebody saw you on the street, they wouldn't find you an attractive man. But
No,
nobody's
but we
gonna
don't have accounts of people who were disbelievers and remained disbelievers. We just don't have. We don't have accounts of people who were disbelievers and remained disbelievers. There are no accounts like this in the issue. So where are the records of Muslim history? I'm coming to you, yeah? But when you get some quarrels and stuff, come back up. Yeah. Why don't we have accounts of people who were disbelievers, who encountered the Prophet, left or whatever, and their accounts are recorded? Where are those accounts? There aren't. So there is no count. This is the problem that the Orientalists have. There was a count narrative.
Yeah.
That's why they dismiss the whole of the Sunnah. They say, well, we have no count narrative. Anyway, let me see.
Okay.
Don't want to go?
You know, when you comment on the Holy Prophet's like coolness and everything, can you tell us how we can implement that in our daily life?
His what?
You know, about his coolness.
That's the next module.
Is it next module?
That's the next module.
Fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Yourself? This is Mullah Hamid.
Mullah Hamid? Is that one? How is it?
He's the chaplain at the University of Wolverhampton.
Ah, right,
The
okay.
Muslim chaplain. And Dr. Asim, as I mentioned, is a psychiatrist at Penn Hospital.
Oh, then we should pick up then. That's good.
Inshallah. And he's inshallah going to come and put some hours of doing the setting of a maktab Monday to Friday.
Oh, nice.
At the center.
Very good. Allah give you a lot of success.
Inshallah. I mean, we'll benefit from you as well, inshallah.
We have a children's class running here at the same time, actually.
Also, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of
They're learning
them.
Arabic or
No. They're learning the same sorts of things about the Prophet ﷺ, about fiqh, about so
okay.
but it's done in a very nice way. It's done through a story. So it's,
Okay.
so it's a nice way to.
Very good,
Thank you.
mashallah. So what is your methodology? How do you lead?
You put up a chair. You can have some.
Yeah. So I think that's a good,
chair,
interesting tool. Because I'm always open person to learn as well. So
How do I do what? Sorry.
now,
How
do you lead the course? Is that some term based or just open session?
It's
Yeah, for some time, inshallah.
that's the course.
Okay.
So it's broken into domains.
Yeah.
Domains of study.
Yeah.
And then into modules.
Right.
And
Okay.
now this here is a module. This is one module. That's one module.
Okay. This whole is one module.
Yeah.
Can I just see through?
Yeah.
I think you're doing great work, mashallah. That's all and said and just arrived today, eventually at this time. So do you have anywhere Arabic language as well? Or
I teach Arabic,
okay,
but it isn't part of this course.
yeah,
The purpose of this course is to give people all the Islamic guidance that they need
yeah,
at their level. They don't need Arabic
yes,
to
yes,
practice their religion.
yeah, yes,
The Arabic comes later. So I teach a course in Arabic as well,
okay,
which is the classical Arabic.
inshallah.
But that's how I teach it.
Very good,
In
mashallah.
each semester we cover maybe 3 modules, maybe 4 modules or what have you, depending on how long they are
Okay,
and how many questions we get.
yes, that's right.
So it's very much at the pace of the students.
So do we have a good number of students here as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's 40, 50 students here.
40, mashallah, very good. So
Alhamdulillah.
it's the weekly one session. 4 hours, 3 hours?
3 hours.
3 hours, okay. So do many students from Wolverhampton as well?
To be honest, I kind of brought this class from Walsall, where I was
Yeah.
teaching it before.
Oh, so
We
you
haven't
were
really
leading
advertised.
in the Warsaw
It
class?
was in Walsall for about 4 years. We haven't really advertised it in Wolverhampton. There are people from Wolverhampton that come.
Yeah,
We haven't really advertised, but there are people that come from Birmingham, people from West Brom,
Mashallah,
that sort of stuff.
mashallah.
I haven't done because we don't really have the space, to be honest.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I was just talking to Yusuf about this actually.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the, how do you charge like?
The charge is the theoretical charge
Yeah,
is £120 per semester.
okay,
And semester is 16 to 18 weeks long,
right, okay.
but in practice, most people aren't paying that. It's lots of sort of discounts. And
Okay, yeah, we are facing these problems in our community anyway, yes, that's right.
So what I found, one thing I sometimes get asked, why do you charge? One of the reasons is you come for 6 weeks because you're enthusiastic.
Yeah,
Week 6, someone's getting married. There's a good football game on. You know what I mean? That sort of thing.
yeah, I understand.
So the thing that holds you and makes you keep coming is the fact that I paid for this. I'm going to get my money's worth. Then good.
Absolutely,
Because when that dip comes, you need something to carry you over.
that's right.
And this is what we found. You know, when things are done like this, I've seen this many times. Oh, I got a free course. Yeah, first week, 50 people per child.
Yeah.
Second week, 30 people.
Yeah.
By
Another
6 weeks
3-4
in,
weeks.
there's 10 people
Yes,
left. That's it.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You know?
Very true. So it is, people show commitment when they pay.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
Because it makes them value. It makes them, it puts
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
makes them value itself. So this module, each module has aims and objectives. It's on that page there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one.
So you've got aims
Yeah.
and objectives.
Yes.
And then the modules, it's a lot of learning theory in here. So
No, that's very interesting one. Is there any age restriction as well?
For this class, we want the students to be 15 years old. What we've done is created another class for students from about the age of about 9 to about 15 years old,
Okay.
which teaches a similar thing, but in a
Method.
much simpler,
Yeah.
much simpler form.
Okay. I think that's very good because my name is al-Habib, and I'm chaplain, as the brother mentioned, the university, but also running maktab for a long time now, about 8, 9, 10 years. So
Whereabouts?
that was in Marines in Wolverhampton. In Marines area in Wolverhampton. So we are about 40, 50 students, girls and boys. Me and my wife both teach.
Good. Yeah.
I've also been imam in one of the centres as well in Wolverhampton for about 7 years.
Sure.
But then got leave from mosque due to the commitments in the university. And
What's it like in the university?
university is it's very good, quite inspirational environment, and sometimes challenging as well. But really feel happy, comfortable, leading our students in different ways. Of course, in religious issues, in social issues. Feel very happy, to be honest, when they are leading events, Islamic events within the university environment. So there we are sometimes, of course, building relationships between university and the students. Islamic society is there as well with the
Very
other
important thing, yeah.
yeah with other societies as well.
What sort of issues? What sort of issues do you face? Do you think all students face?
Well, variety of issues again. Sometimes the deadlock between the lecturer and the students around the Friday prayer, especially. So that's one thing where we have to interpret and find the solution as well.
Yeah.
That's one thing. So because we cover all 3 campuses: Telford, Walsall, Wolverhampton. So that's one area. The other area is the fresh affairs. So we advertise our services because prayer room, all three campuses, to guide the students what time the prayers are, where the prayer rooms are. So everything around the area. So similarly, one of the thing is the involvement with the Islamic Society because they organize the courses. So just if we go a little bit back, that was prevent agenda as well on the top list, unfortunately. But Alhamdulillah, our input was very good in a way that something which is quite racial, we went from there. No, this is not right. So you have to be quite bring equality into that. Don't use Hassan name. Don't use Zakaria name. You don't use Muhammad name that they were so and so and so. No, just use the no recognized character.
Yeah.
But something could be David as well, could be John as well. So just use so that was quite good, Alhamdulillah. So these are variety of activities, to be honest. My role is part-time there, 20 hours a week.
Okay.
But it's very good, multi-faith team. We've got one Sikh chaplain, Muslim chaplain, Christian chaplains. Friday prayer happens there as well. Yeah. Okay, so mashallah, very nice.
Mashallah, the quality of these things is
Very, very good.
very good.
Very, very good.
From the point of view of it's very concise, the publishing, the color, the fonts,
Alhamdulillah.
I spent a lot of time on this.
So
No.
at what point are we in there? Have you just started or already reached a certain level when?
The point about, because it's modular,
Yeah,
each module is self-sufficient. So
Right.
you can pretty much jump in at any time. There are bits that you've missed, but you don't need those bits to understand what comes
understand.
next.
Okay, yeah,
So it's been designed in that way because people do come in and out.
yeah,
But the aim at the end of it is the domains that you covered. So beliefs, which is your aqidah, worship, which just deals with the
Yeah.
ibadat stuff.
Yeah.
Then mu'amalat is rather than teaching the fiqh of trade, or not the fiqh of marriage, for example, we
Yeah.
teach ethics in marriage.
yeah,
So the fiqh is there, but the focus is on ethics.
right,
Same with trade, the fiqh is there,
yeah,
but the emphasis is on being,
ethics, yeah,
having integrity.
understand.
Same with halal, haram, and so forth. Then there is a module, a domain which is called methodology and principles. So there you've got, an introduction to Quran, an introduction to the Hadith, an introduction to madhabs, and so forth. So we have, those things are covered and explained so that people understand. So people understand them and they know how to navigate them basically.
Very good.
Yeah, and then there's a quite a large. There's one very important domain which is on character. So we have a module. This particular module links to it, but there's a module on. There are two modules on good character. Whether it's things like good character with Allah, like truthfulness and humility and worshipfulness and so forth, and then one good character with creation, which is about mercy and truthfulness to people and so forth.
Yeah.
And then we have a domain on the Prophet ﷺ.
Sallallahu
So there's a shama'il, there's this which is the character of the Prophet
Yeah.
ﷺ. Seerah as well as in there, and so forth. So there are these various.
Very good. So do you have anything, because if I mean that's something that of course our youth especially need today. This is I feel that's very, very useful for our youth. If we can advertise somewhere in the university as well, so that will be very helpful because university is quite open place where people can come.
And I have
Lots of students are around on the weekend.
Of course they are. Of course they are. Yes.
So they can benefit from
and I haven't done it yet. We come to the end of a semester, but I'm interested in talk to the team about how to proceed. And these are some of the things that we're thinking about. So, we'll see how it goes, inshallah. But yeah, we'll be happy for the students to know about it. Of course, the more people that benefit, the better, ultimately.
Yeah, of
especially
course.
students, because
Of course. Because
they're
that's the
exposed
age
to a lot
they're-
of
Yeah.
they're exposed to a lot of things, and it's good that they have that anchor. But,
And also they're away from home. You can let people invest too. They're not in
Absolutely.
Manchester or
Absolutely. Just
Scotland or
yeah,
wherever.
just sitting in their rooms and
So
just chatting and.
It's a Sunday evening.
Yeah.
Unless they've gone home for the weekend, if they haven't, if they're around.
They go bi-weekly or sometime even longer period. Yes.
I mean, this course is also streamed. I mean, it's streamed online. So there are people online now, for example, who weren't able to come in for whatever reason, or are from too far to come in. And they just
Okay, so they're learning from online as well. Okay, very good.
yeah.
Yes.
For that, actually,
Recording?
although it's recording, it also hooks up. We have a mother and baby room. So if
Okay.
mom, so this is we very much encourage families to.
Yes. Yes.
If mom has come and the baby is troubling, you can go to the mother and baby room. There's a big TV. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Big TV screen. This hooks up to it, so they can
Very
watch
good.
the whole thing. So we make it as accessible as possible. And then there are new Muslims that come. And
Yes.
so forth, so,
Yes.
I need to get back to teaching now. But
Yes, that's fine. Inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Inshallah. See you soon. I may join sometime as well, so benefit from this. Inshallah. Definitely. Do you have any card number, something?
I don't have anything. I don't have a card. My number I can give you by all means.
Okay. You are and then.
Yeah, I'll type it in.
Thank you very much. Inshallah.
That one.
There's just given a missed call, so my name is Abdul Hamid. You should save some time, so inshallah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum.
Oh yeah. You okay? Yeah. You're gonna pull up a pew.
Sorry?
You're gonna pull up a pew.
Oh, I'm fine. I'll just kneel down.
Yes, I got your email. I didn't respond to it. I mean, I got your text. I didn't respond to it. We're better talking in person.
Yeah, I think you need to speak to him because I just get a bit like I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me that. Both of you don't. I don't want to call. I don't want to cause fights. So.
Oh no, there's no voice. It's just how you were saying a few weeks back that people want to say I was speaking to the other guy and what was I'm saying like he wanted to take if I wanted to not if people wanted to take that next step and it's just well you've got the issue so you should really bring it up not me.
Honestly, I'm very I don't know whether it's the devil playing online. No, this year is getting very conspiracy like today. I've been listening to you, but then I read you're tired for you see what the problem is, and I was saying last night earlier when I got there, I don't know.
But it was like last week when I came back from the week and you were like really angry. And I was just really like, you come back and just say and
Thinking different things, wrong things. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I don't feel really confident about it.
Specifically or generally?
I don't know. It's like, last time I found you about why you follow positive shit. It's like really because it seems to give me a lot more. So, no, it was saying I don't understand it a little bit. I try to understand it a little bit. Last time I explained it to you, but I don't know. I just really confused about it.
So why are you getting angry?
Yeah, I feel allowed to get angry because she's talking about it and I want to control about it and then I was thinking a lot of time to say it, still not on, coming back to here, something happened, stuff like that. And then it's like, she sometimes she's talking about yourself. They start saying that I think why something from you, and you know, the last time we talked about it, and you mentioned similar things. I know it's wrong for me to think like this, and
I'll tell you what. No, I think it's some of it is completely understandable. There's an element which is, for want of a better word, doctrinal.
yeah.
So it's like, is this okay? Is this allowed to do this? That's understandable. And then there is an element of it that is a concern about the relationship.
which is understandable as well. What you've got there are two, on the face of it, understandable concepts. What you then have, on top of that, is now the shaitan's got something. So now you've got that. That's why I asked you.
About what's going on at the moment. I know it's not been thinking like this, but I would be honest about it and probably out to the door.
And I'll tell you this, look, there was a sister who asked, look, you were one of the people that asked me about it. Okay, I put it up, I can't put it up any longer. There was another sister who asked, who wasn't asking for it. And I said to her, I just what you do. And she said, oh, he won't mind. And I said, no, ask him.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is a special relationship between just the teachers generally and and students. There's nothing of Moshe that way. But and it can be something that if you're not part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I told you this when my parents initially took their I said, no, I knew and I knew the shit. I was like, you I knew the shit. And I love it. And at the time, I respected him a lot. But he was in the house and said, listen, isn't it? No, I knew last time you're going to put your socks on in the morning.
That's the problem, I'm saying one thing, you're saying another thing.
No solution to that. That's what you're concerned. That's concerned. Come on.
But that's what I'm
No, that's what
thinking.
she's saying, and then
Because, see, what's it?
I mean, today alhamdulillah the day off. But sometimes I'm at work or that's what we do in the office.
Yeah, what, you should be working every Sunday since then?
I've been working on a second lazy on the back
So,
now.
no, I know, because no one's busy. Look, there's a couple of guys, for example, every second they're not. Because they've got family plans, or they've got childcare commitments or whatever. Yeah? I tell them, you come when you can. If you are at work, you can't. If you don't have to pay, okay, Skype it. And let her hear the secret as well. Just as going in the house. Because it's secret of it. So participate because the thing that will make you feel okay about the inverted commas relationship is your relationship with your if you also
If I'm there, I'm doing it, I'm involved.
you're involved.
Yeah.
You're involved, but also you come in here and you're honest with but honest with I was actually when I saw you today, I was so really I was so
where all your belongings, where all your kids, and your kids have got all their stuff. Those who are in past cases especially find a lot of bags and things left behind. And it just adds up into the boot of my car. I take everything and I put it there. So I really don't want to do that because I just take my shopping as well. So I'd appreciate if you check and make sure all your stuff is taken with you.
It's perfectly cool if you restrict Nazima's shopping space. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Rabbi yassir wa inni ya kareem. وافتح لنا بالحق أنت الفتاح العليم. You right going? Shan? Shane? I've done that. Say again. You need to. Yeah. Guys, it's Maghrib time. Let's pray Maghrib. Let's pray Maghrib, please. Right now. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Okay, let's move straight on, shall we? I'm not quite sure what's happened to the projector screen. Just press the button on top. Okay, so the next section is on the beautiful companionship of the Prophet ﷺ, how he was with people. And we've spoken a lot about this, and there are innumerable examples. The Sunnah in this regard is really a mine. You can really take a lot out from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ if you are looking, depending on what you're looking for. And there's much you can learn, in the various hadiths and interactions, because every hadith, remember, is an interaction between the Prophet ﷺ and somebody. Okay? Whether between the Prophet ﷺ and the narrator of the hadith, or between the Prophet ﷺ and other people that was witnessed, and so forth. But there is an interaction going on here. And there's much you can take from any given interaction. It's not just the thing the Prophet ﷺ is talking about. But in terms of how he was with people, so two examples here. One is the treatment of his his close people. So, for example, this is a lovely one. This is his friendliness with family and loved ones. So Muslim narrates that Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas said that once Umar asked permission to enter upon the Prophet ﷺ, whilst he had with him some women of the Quraysh who were speaking to him and asking him many questions with raised voices. Umar sought permission to enter, and they began to rush to cover themselves. The Prophet ﷺ gave him permission. He came in, and he was smiling. Umar said, "May Allah ever cause your teeth to smile, O Messenger of Allah." He said, "I was amused by the ladies who were with me. When they heard your voice, they ran away." Umar said, "It is more fitting that they should fear you, O Messenger of Allah." Then he turned to the women and said, "O enemies of yourselves, do you fear me and not the Messenger of Allah?" "Indeed, yes," they said, "you are fiercer." He said, "By the one in whose hand is my soul." The Prophet ﷺ then said, "By the one in whose hand is my soul, Satan never came upon you following a path." He said that he took a different one. This is a lovely narration for a variety of reasons. First is that, and again, I'm sorry, but these things, you can talk about them a lot. I will try to condense this as much as possible, but it tells you so much if you understand the context. The Meccans, and I think I mentioned this to you before, the Meccans had a pretty patriarchal society. Medinan society was a lot less patriarchal. In some ways, it was the back home versus here type of thing. Relationships were a lot less hierarchical in Medina than they were in Mecca. The Meccans, of course, the Meccans who come to Medina are the closest companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They are the oldest companions and the most senior companions of the Prophet ﷺ. But they do find themselves as strangers in a strange land. Okay, and there is you could probably, perhaps a sitcom would be the wrong. We could probably write a sitcom about the travails of the Meccans in Medina, because it was a big culture shock to them. Okay. And at one point, and Sayyidina Umar was one who really felt this, because that was his personality. He was an alpha male, in a nutshell, and he was used to a certain level of deference, shall we say, from women to men, and from wives to husbands, and so forth. He was used to that. That was his culture. That was something that he expected, and and he, how shall I say? It colored his understanding of what Islam said about gender relations. Okay? And this is something you need to be aware of. You see this right from the time of the Prophet. We all have a particular set of glasses with which we look at our religion and we look at the world around us. And those glasses and filters are formed by your personality, are formed by your psychology, are formed by your culture, your upbringing, your experiences, and so forth. And nobody is free from this. Except for the Prophet ﷺ, which is why he is Nabiyul Ummi. He is an-Nabiyul Ummi. This is one of the meanings of an-Nabiyul Ummi. Yeah, that the Prophet ﷺ, when the revelation passed through him, it was not influenced by preconceptions of culture, by preconceptions of gender, by preconceptions of class, and all of the other filters that we have. Okay? Now, what you have here is the Prophet ﷺ, in a very beautiful way, correcting, removing some of the scales from the eyes of Sayyidina Umar, doing tarbiyah of Sayyidina Umar. Because Sayyidina Umar, what is the scenario here? Sayyidina Umar said something to his wife, and his wife basically kind of gave it back to him. You know, they had an argument in a nutshell. And he had a go at her, and she had a go straight back at him. And he was absolutely stunned. He said, what? Where's this come from? My good, dutiful wife from the Quraysh, yeah, has now been corrupted by these women and this culture in Medina. In a nutshell, this is a paraphrase, okay? Right? Have you become like this? You speak to your husband like this now? Yeah? And she said to him, not only do I speak to you like this now, yeah, but I know someone who speaks to someone better than you like this. He says, who? He says, your daughter. You should hear how your daughter talks to the Prophet ﷺ. He was furious. What? It's one thing that, you know, that my wife has talked to me like this, but someone talking to the Prophet ﷺ like this? Yeah, and my daughter doing it? He storms off. And it so happens that in the house of Hafsa, the Prophet ﷺ is gathered with all of the wives. And they are, we don't know, up to this, I certainly don't know, what they were talking to him about. But they were talking to him in a, shall we say, an energetic way. And Sayyidina Umar could hear this from like before he even got to the door. Okay? So he comes up and now he's, you know, and he knocks on the door. I think what the hadith, one of the hadith explains in more detail, says that his shadow crossed the portal. And the wives of the Prophet ﷺ ran. They ran behind a curtain. Now, partly, yes, they saw hijab, but they didn't just cover their hair. They ran behind a curtain. They were hiding from Sayyidina Umar. Sayyidina Umar comes in, and the Prophet ﷺ is not smiling. The Prophet ﷺ is laughing. One of the accounts says, Sayyidina Umar said, I could see his molar teeth, which means he was head back laughing. Head back, a mouth open, laughing. And the Prophet, like we would say, he's killing it laughing. And he says, Ya Rasul, what was going on? I heard like there was a fight going on. He said, no, they were just asking. He said, but I heard raised voices. He said, is that how your wives talk to you? And who is one of them is his daughter. Is that how your wives talk to you? Yeah, the Prophet said, yeah. And then he says to them, shame. And he said, then the Prophet said, Umar, when they heard your voice, when they saw your shadow, they ran. They ran behind the curtain. And then he says, Ya Rasulullah, why are they afraid of me? They should be afraid of you. Meaning, what by afraid? Respect. They should have that more respect for you than they have for me. Yeah? What does the Prophet say? Yeah? Then he turns to them. The Prophet says, he turns to them and he says, shame on you. Shame on you. Yeah? You talk like this to the Prophet of Allah, the Prophet of God, but when Umar comes, you run. And it was Salama, not Hafsa, mind you. It was Salama that says, they said, yeah, we are more afraid, not respectful. We have more respect of the Prophet yeah, that you know, but we are scared of you. Because you are strict, you are fierce. The Prophet is not like that. He bears with us. And because he gives us rope, so we skip. Basically, right? Yeah? And this was the message that the Prophet wanted to give to them and Sayyidina Umar, because now bear in mind the Prophet does not say to them at this point, no, does not, but actually now it's come up You really shouldn't be talking to me like this. Yeah, he didn't say that. He left it. Right? And so because of that, Sayyidina Umar learned something. And he learned, in a nutshell, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Cultural differences do not make, differences in culture don't necessarily make you a bad person. Right? As we said at the beginning of this class, the Sunnah can emerge in different ways. The issue isn't, as I think I mentioned the last class, the issue isn't a patriarchal society. The issue isn't an unpatriarchal society. The issue is to ensure that in both of those, that oppression does not occur. Okay, that's the critical thing. It's to ensure that if there is a social imbalance of power, the imbalance of power does not lead to oppression. It does not lead to tyranny. Okay, the Prophet gave us the sunnah of dealing with unequal social relationships, social hierarchies. What is the sunnah? What I call the sunnah of social hierarchies, which is what? You have compassion for those who are in a lower social position to you, and you have respect for those who are in a higher social position to you. Hang on. Let's not get into it. This is just, let's take the sunnah. We'll get into the details in the next module. So, this is what the sunnah that the Prophet is teaching about. But he then makes him feel good. He then makes him feel good. Yeah? He doesn't let Sayyidina Umar be disgraced. Because he's, again, the poor guy has come all the way to the Prophet, and again, he's been answered back by a woman. That's what's happened. The woman has, and the Prophet hasn't said anything. He just kept quiet. Right? So then he says, Umar, I swear by Allah. Yeah? You know, because what did Salama say to him? You are ashad. Anta ashad minhu. You are not stricter, fiercer, harsher than the Prophet ﷺ. Right? Now, is there a problem with shiddah? Is there a problem with that fierceness? Yeah? What did the Prophet say? He said, Omar, I swear by Allah, if the shaitan sees you, he crosses the street. That's basically what that hadith means. When the shaitan sees you, he crosses the street. Yeah? What do you, if you are a person who is jalali, if you are a person who is strict and strong, what do you target your guns at? This is the question. If you are Rambo, all right, who do you target your guns at? And you don't target your guns at people who are weak. You don't target your guns against the person you're meant to be defending and protecting. You target your guns against the enemy. Who is the enemy? There is only one enemy. Inna shaytana lakum aduwwun mubina. The shaitan is your manifest enemy. So even in that, you see something about how the Prophet was with his family. You also see how he taught. You also see something about societies. This Medina to Mecca paradigm shift is very much like maybe the older generations, or maybe some of you yourselves. You know, you come from a particular society, you come into a society that's a very different society. What do you do? How do you navigate this new society? Do you hold on to everything and try to just establish it where you are? Or do you just forget it and concede and assimilate to everything? Or do you find a balance between the two? That you preserve what is good of the culture that you brought with you. Like for a lot of us, respect for parents, respect for the... I was telling you, we were going through yesterday, looking at the United Nations Charter of Human Rights. And when we were going, I was kind of I chaired these symposia. So I was saying to the guys, we're going to go through it. I want you not to think about what you have a problem with. I want you to think about what you agree with. I want you to think about which articles you think don't go far enough. And one of the things that they pointed out is that there is no article of the Human Rights the Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations about care and provision for the elderly, i.e. your parents, the old people in society. Where is the article that says, that it is a human right that when you get to a certain age, you have a right to be looked after, to be taken care of, to have social support, to be not be isolated in your homes, etc., etc. That this is something we as Muslims, or as, I mean, Hindus wouldn't disagree with this. They would say the same thing. This is a traditional society, it's not a Muslim thing, it's a traditional society thing that our religion affirms. That's the completion of good character, not establishment of good character. Traditional societies look after their elderly. Yeah? Modern societies don't look after their elderly. We're too busy to look after our elderly. Yeah? So this is something that we as Muslims can contribute. So yes, preserve what is good of your culture and adopt what is good of the culture, the culture that you come into. And where there is a discrepancy, you don't say what is discordant with my home culture is wrong. No, you say what is discordant with Islam is wrong. What do you mean by Islam? I'm giving you a nice easy thing here. What you mean by Islam is the character of the Prophet ﷺ, because he was the walking Quran. He كان خلقه القرآن. Sayyida Aisha said his character was the Quran. Okay, so it's a hadith. It wasn't even mentioned. The hadith is not even on the slide. Yeah, but it's such an important narration. Yeah, and it really humanizes everyone. Yeah, which is very important to understand. So, okay, we move on. So I'm assuming most of you will know how the Prophet, for example, should say to Anas. Anas has this beautiful hadith. And Anas, bear in mind, was the servant boy of the Prophet ﷺ. Not related to the Prophet ﷺ at all. Okay, he is the servant of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, he's his ghulam. Right? Hands up if any of you have ever had a ghulam or a maid. And not in this country, obviously, back home. Yeah, so in South Africa, one of the massive culture shocks I had when we moved to South Africa is maids. Maids, garden boys, that sort of stuff. It's like, what? What's this? And I, kind of, red or dead, I mean, it's like labor till you die. What's this? Servants? Yeah? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And everyone else was like, yeah, right. My sister-in-law, I'm sure she won't mind me saying it, but my sister-in-law, when she came, she married my brother and she went to South Africa. And, she's from Scotland actually. And she had the same reaction. She was like, maids, la astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, I would never be, now, 5 years in, can't do without the maid. Oh my God, the maid's sick. What am I going to do? You get used to these things. And there is a particular type of relationship that forms. There's a particular type of relationship that forms. Okay? That's in the 21st century. Yeah, that's in the 21st century. Now imagine in the 7th century, when slavery was a thing, not just in Arabia, but all over the world. All over the world. Slavery is just a thing. It's just part of life. Anas was one step above a slave. Anas was one step above a slave. Okay? And he was a young kid. He was a 10-year-old. And he said, I served the Prophet ﷺ for 10 years. Never once did he say to me, why did you do that if I did something wrong? As in from the perspective of serving. Never once did he say to me, why didn't you do that if I forgot to do something or I didn't do something? He never reviled me, scolded me, or hit me. If one of his household reprimanded me, he would say, leave him be. If something is predestined, it will occur. Okay? And there's this lovely account about this that says, and Anas said, because now Anas, bear in mind that Anas, 10 years old when he comes to the Prophet, and 20 years old when the Prophet passes away. And to Anas is given the honor of the last hadith in the Shama'il of Imam Tirmidhi. And the last hadith in the Shama'il of Imam Tirmidhi, the last major hadith in the Shama'il of Imam Tirmidhi is this. This is from Anas. Anas begins the Shama'il Tirmidhi, Anas ends the Shama'il Tirmidhi. The great work on the description of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, it became illuminated. Everything was illuminated. And when he died, everything was plunged into darkness. And we did not know where to turn. That's Anas. As a 20-year-old, he loses the Prophet ﷺ, who he's basically lived with for 10 years. Yeah? And it's a wrenching experience. Losing your parents is a wrenching experience. Losing your guide especially when you have that kind of relationship, is a tremendously dislocating experience. Yeah, and but Anas grows, becomes a man, he marries, he has children, lots of children, and Anas passed away at the age of 90. The age of 90. And one of the narrations of Anas bin Malik, he says that every night when I sleep, I see my beloved. Every night when I sleep, I see the Prophet ﷺ. And he started to cry. As he narrated, he cries. Yeah, that was the love, the love that Anas had, mind you, as a 90-year-old. As a 90-year-old for the Prophet ﷺ. It's one thing talking about Sayyidina Abu Bakr, who knew the Prophet ﷺ pretty much for 60 years. But Anas knew him for 10 years at the beginning of his life. Yeah? And at the age of 90, he still had that same feeling for the Prophet ﷺ. What is it that creates that kind of a bond? I want you to think about this. What creates that kind of a bond with someone? And I'll give you the example of my own sheikh. My sheikh met his sheikh when he was 14 years old. He took bay'ah in his spiritual path when he was 14 years old, at the insistence of his mother, mind you. At the insistence of his mother. He was like, what's all this stuff? He's in 14, what's all this stuff? Even though he came from family of awliya Allah. He was like, what? Sheikh, what's that all about? Yeah, he took bay'ah at the age of 14. He spent about 9 months with his sheikh, who was also his uncle. Then his uncle, my grand sheikh, left and went back to India. And my sheikh never saw him again. Never saw him again. 3 years later, he passed away. My sheikh's relationship with his sheikh at the age of 75 years old, when my sheikh passed away, was stronger than the relationships of people with my sheikh, who had been with my sheikh for 30 years. Been sitting in front of him every day for 30 years. And his relationship with the person he met for a 9-month period at the age of 14 years old. At the age of 75, the bond he had with his sheikh was something was just astonishing to behold. When he would talk about his sheikh, he would start to tear. Now, okay, a year later, yeah, maybe. But 60 years later, this is what you see with Anas. 70 years after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, having seen everything he'd seen in his life, the expansion of the Muslim, think of what happened by 70 years after the Hijrah. Anas passed away in 90, the year 90 of the Hijrah. Abu Hanifa was born in the year 80 of the Hijrah, man. Think about everything Anas had seen. Yeah, the Khilafah, the assassination of Uthman, the assassination of Ali, civil war among the Muslims, the Umayyad dynasty, the spread of Islam, across the whole world, basically. Yeah, and the spread of the empire across the whole world, the corruption of those kings, what he would have considered to be the ruining of Islam, the martyrdom of the grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ, the toppling of that dynasty and its replacement with another one, all of these things that Anas has seen. And through all of that, his love, and it is love, there's no other word for it, his love for the Prophet ﷺ grew stronger and stronger and stronger. Yeah? What is it that creates that kind of a bond? Because we read this. I was 20 years, 10 years, he never scolded me, he never... Those of you that are parents, can you say that about your own children? And that's your blood. That's your blood. Can you say, I never once said, why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? I never scolded them. I never reviled them. I never hit them. Yeah? And this is not how the Prophet ﷺ was with his children. This is how the Prophet ﷺ was with his slave. Basically. Yeah? And this is the character of the Prophet. This is the beautiful character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, Anas relates this beautiful thing. He said, "Look, I was the servant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I really wasn't very good. He'd tell me to do things, and I'd forget. He'd tell me to do. He'd send me out on an errand because he's his servant. He'd send me out on an errand. I'd go. There'd be some of my friends. I'd get chatting to some of my friends. I'd completely forget about what the messenger of God told me to go and do. I completely forgot about it. I'd wander back 2 hours later. The Prophet said this, Anas. Oh yeah. Wait, I'll go get it now. Yeah. He said, I really will. He said, one time I broke something. I was messing about and I broke something. And the household of the Prophet were furious. And they came after me, and I sought, this is his words, I sought refuge with the Prophet ﷺ. Asta'idhu bi Rasulillah. I took ta'awud. This is like a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. A'udhu bi Rasulillah. I sought refuge with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I hid behind him. And now I want you to picture the scene, right? I was talking about cavalry charges before, right? Now imagine the cavalry charge of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anas fleeing, right? And he comes and he hides behind the Prophet. He's got to stand like this behind the Prophet like this, right? And the Prophet takes his garment. I can't do this, but he takes his garment and he does this. He does it. He kind of holds it out like that, like to protect Anas. Yeah, like this. Yeah, and they're like trying to get at him. They're trying to grab him, but they can't because the Prophet is protecting him. And he's laughing and he said, "Leave him, leave him." It was the decree of Allah. It was the decree of Allah. Yeah. Now, parents, I've just in one stroke put all of you in trouble. So. Your children are going to hold you to that forever, as my children did to me. So alhamdulillah. So this was how the Prophet was. He honored people. He would turn and face people in conversation. How many times you have conversations with people? I sometimes have this dilemma here. There are 3 people waiting to speak to me. One person is speaking to me, the 2 other people. Now what do I do? How do you do that? What's the sunnah of the Prophet? How would he handle these situations? Right? One of the beautiful things about the Prophet is how he would initiate a conversation, how he would terminate a conversation. He had a beautiful way of initiating conversations and a beautiful way of terminating conversations when there were other people waiting for him as well. Yeah, and this is and he would turn. He would إِذَا الْتَفَتَ جَمِيعًا is the wording of the hadith in the Shama'il Tirmidhi. When he turned to people, he would turn to them completely. Meaning, he wouldn't, if someone's talking to him, he wouldn't do that. He'd do this. Right? Somebody's calling you over here, you wouldn't say, yeah? He would say, yes. That's how the Prophet ﷺ would deal with people. But the other meaning of iltafata is he would turn his full attention to them. Right? So sometimes you're talking and you're talking to someone else says, yeah. Yeah, you're not really paying attention to what's being said. But when you spoke to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ would bless you with all of his attention. What happens? Just think about, and again, these are things that manifest a quality. And they manifest a quality of empathy. They manifest a quality of respect for others. Right? When is it that you would kind of half acknowledge somebody who was talking to you when you're already in a conversation? If the conversation you were involved in you felt it was more important than what that person was saying to you, or the person you were talking to was more important than the other person who was talking to you. Think about, for example, when you're talking to someone and you get a phone call. So you're talking to someone, they get a phone call and they do, excuse me. Yeah? Yeah. And 5-minute conversation. And they put the phone in. What were you saying? How do you feel in that 5 minutes? How do you feel in that 5 minutes? How does it make you feel? Correctly, is that was clearly more important than I am. And it may well be. It may be an important phone call. I saw a thing on a WhatsApp picture once, and it was obviously it was like an empty naan tray. The plastic trays they give the naan in the restaurants, right? And it was empty, and there were a whole lot of phones and the mobile phones in there. And the caption was, "Whoever's wife calls first pays the bill." Right? So what is this? This is a bunch of lads who've gone out and are chilling, probably in a shisha lounge somewhere, chilling, and the game is all the phones go into the thing, and whoever's wife calls first, where the hell are you? That phone call, right? That guy pays the bill. Right? What is it saying? The Prophet ﷺ made people feel special. And it is not, I'm not going to say to you it is a sunnah to make people feel special. Because we're not talking about sunnahs here, we're talking about character. What I'm going to say to you is that it is from the sunnah to view everybody as valuable, everybody as important, and everybody as worthy of your attention. That is the sunnah. When you feel that way about people, no matter what their station is, no matter what their rank relative to you is, and so forth, then you will naturally fulfill all of these sunnahs. Okay? And that was the way of the Prophet, which then meant that if the Prophet did not greet you in that way, or ignored you, or turned away from you, your heart is going to sink to your boots. Because this is so unlike the Prophet ﷺ. The first thing you will think about is, what did I do? So now, even a tiny gesture or the absence of something small becomes something to teach you something. You become very, very sensitive to that person and therefore very receptive to learning. Okay? Clear. Right? I used to tell my mum is a tremendous backseat driver. I mean, she's really good. You know, my mum will be, like, watch out for that. What? That thing. What? That? It's 3 miles away. Yeah, but you gotta watch out for it. Start slowing down from now. So my mum is. And my mum will always complain that my dad does not listen to her. Doesn't listen to what she has to say. And then on the rare occasions that something happens, my dad, something goes wrong, or he has to brake too hard before a red light or something. My mom says, I told you, why did you, what's wrong with you? How many times do I have to tell you I told you about the light? And then, of course, she complains to me, why doesn't your father listen to you? And this is the time I was 10. My dad is a tremendously patient person. This is the time I was 10. And I remember saying to my mum when I was 13, I said, do you know why dad doesn't really listen to you when you call out directions? And my dad has a lot of respect for my mum, just not when she's sitting in the passenger seat. He will listen to everything she has to say, except when she's in the passenger seat. I said, do you know why? She says, no, why? I kind of stopped her mid-tirade. She said, why? I said, because you say it so often that it just becomes background noise. So on the occasion that you actually have something genuine, valuable to say, you're not listening. If you're always, what is this? What's this? What is this? Come on. What's this called? The boy that cried wolf. And I said that to her. I said, this is Peter and the wolf. You know the story of the boy who cried wolf? There was a boy, Russian story, you know it's not going to end well. If it's a Russian fairy tale, it ain't going to end well. All right? So there's this kid, and he's a naughty kid, and he's looking after the sheep one day, and he's bored, so he wants a bit of excitement. So he calls out to the people of the village, help, help, wolf, wolf, and they all come running because the sheep are going to get eaten by the wolves. They come there, and the sheep are peacefully grazing the boys, and they're laughing at them. He said, what happened? He said, no, there's no, I'm just joking. Stupid boy, go back again. Second time, right? Second time, same thing. Wolf, wolf, they all come running again. Oh, there's a wolf, there's a wolf. There's no wolf. Ha ha, you people are so stupid, I fooled you again. What do you think happens the third time? There's a wolf. There's a wolf. Now he goes, please help, there's a wolf, there's a wolf. Please help. And what does everyone say? Oh, stupid Peter thinks he's going to fool us. Yeah? We're not going to fall for it this time. How does the story end? Peter gets eaten by the wolf. Sorry, that's how the actual fairy tale ends. He doesn't get rescued by someone random. He gets eaten by the wolf. Right? The point here is that if something becomes a habit, you're not, if something becomes a habit, you're not going to notice it because it's a habit. Something that is different from that habit will now become very noticeable. So with the Prophet ﷺ, his displeasure there could be the sign of the signs of his displeasure were very, very slight. The Sahaba would say, for example, we knew when the Prophet ﷺ was angry because his cheeks would, because he did get angry. We knew when he was angry because his cheeks would become red. We knew when he was angry because there was a vein here which would start to bulge. But that's how you knew he was angry? How do you know your family member is angry? How do you know when your husband is angry? How do you know when your wife is angry? Yeah? Well, because they get their cheeks get rosy? No, I really don't think so. Yeah, I really don't think so. Yeah, the shouting will tell you from down the street. The guy at the end of the road knows your wife is angry with you, or your husband is angry with you, right? So, but look at the subtlety of the signs of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, remember that it was the job of the Prophet ﷺ. It was his duty. It was his duty. Munkar, to call out wrong things. It was wajib on him to do it. He had to call out things when things were wrong. He had to say something. This is why part of the sunnah is what the Sahaba did and the Prophet didn't say anything about. Because if the Prophet didn't say anything about it, it means he was okay with it. But how would the Prophet express that displeasure that is wajib for him to show? It could be in these really subtle things. Why? Because his basic nature was so beautiful that the hint of sternness was sufficient to teach the Sahaba. And if you want to learn a lesson, as a parent, this is the lesson that you learn. If your nature and the way you are is loving, yeah, then you can afford for the signs of your displeasure to be very, very subtle. Because of the relationship, that very strong, loving, and venerating relationship that your children have with you, they will pick up on those little things. Yeah, that's the best way to do tarbiyah. And that is how you can do tarbiyah. You can be strict without harshness. Yeah.
Sheikh, when the Prophet would get angry, how would the Sahabas make him happy when they get angry?
They wouldn't have to make it up to him. This is the thing, because his anger was a very passing thing. His anger was there to demonstrate that this is not something that God approves of. Yeah, and once it came to an end, that was it. Yeah, they would stop doing whatever it is they were doing. Then the Prophet would be completely fine with them. Yeah, so and that's the other thing. That the other important thing here is when you get angry, don't stay angry. Where relationships get spoilt is when anger persists. Anger goes off very quickly. There's a benefit to anger. There's a certain type of anger. There is a benefit to it, but it becomes rotten very fast. Yeah, you may be quick to anger. So some people are slow to anger, quick to forgive. Some people are quick to anger, quick to forgive. Some people are quick to anger and slow to forgive. Some people are slow to anger and slow to forgive. It's 4 temperaments. 4 types of temperament. Okay? Ask yourself which one of those you are. The one you want to be is slow to anger and quick to forgive. That's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That is the temperament of the Prophet ﷺ. Sayyidina Umar, for example, was quick to anger, quick to forgive. What you don't find among the Sahaba, because they had the tarbiyah of the Prophet ﷺ, was they were not slow to forgive. They may have started off that way, but they didn't end off that way. right? So being slow to forgive. There was a lady came to me, she said, what's the one quality I should look for in a spouse? And I said, someone who is forgiving. Someone who is forgiving. Why? Because mistakes are made. In marriage, you'll make mistakes, you'll get on each other's nerves and so forth. If, however, that anger persists, it can really damage your relationship. Okay? So you get angry, okay, you get angry. Forgive quickly. Cool down quickly. Okay? Anyway, let's move on. So, good fellowship. I'm not letting you go until I finish this slide, this lesson, because this is going to be the third lesson on this lesson. Good fellowship. Whoever stayed with the Prophet and fell in love with him, right? Despite his great rank, people would feel completely at ease around him. He was the most cheerful and smiling face to people in the presence of his companions. He was the easiest to please of people. He was the easiest of people to please, the readiest to accept excuses from others. Think about yourself when you listen to this, right? And measure yourself against it. Okay? Because this was this beautiful disposition of the Prophet ﷺ. Jabir said, whenever the Prophet ﷺ was visited by revelation, or when he was counseling people, you would say, he is a warner of a people to whom punishment has come. But when the state had passed, you would see him the cheeriest of people, the quickest to smile, and the most joyful of them. Okay? He was the gentlest. Sayyidah Aisha was asked, what was the Prophet ﷺ like when he was alone among his household? Now bear in mind, this is the same Sayyidah Aisha that narrated the story of the 11 women. Same Sayyidah Aisha, right? How would the Prophet ﷺ be when he was among his household? And she replied, he was the gentlest of people, smiling and laughing. He was never seen stretching out his legs in front of his companions. Okay? So, for example, Jabir, again, another Jabir narrates this hadith. The Messenger of Allah would be silent for long periods. And he would laugh little. He would smile. This is the fascinating thing about the Prophet. He would smile all the time, but he would laugh seldom. All right? The Sahaba would speak in his company about poetry, their song, their stories from the time of ignorance. They would laugh, and he would smile along with them. Okay? So they would talk about, they would talk about whatever they wanted to talk about in the presence of the Prophet. It's not like you're sitting with the Prophet. It's like sometimes people will sit with me and they'll say, "Oh no, we have to talk about religious stuff now." Because with the Shaykh, right? You got to talk about religious stuff. Yeah, right. This is not how the Sahaba were with the Prophet ﷺ. They would speak about whatever as long as it wasn't sinful, it wasn't gossip or slander or so forth. It wasn't coarse language. These were the limits, but they would talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. All right. And how the Prophet would joke. There's little work written, the hadiths of the jokes of the Prophet, how the Prophet would joke around with his companions. Okay, and he joked. So he says the Prophet used to joke with his companions to spread joy amongst them, to make them relax, so that they might follow his guidance and take on his characteristics. Had he not been cheery and relaxed with his companions, and instead been austere and stern, then they would have become the same way, as would those who followed them, and we would have ended up with a very grumpy religion indeed. Which we still have quite a lot of grumpiness in religion, but we know that it is not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. In the Iranian, it's a while back now, the Iranian elections, there was I forget who it was, but he got elected. He was a liberal. Iran is a theocracy, all right? But he was the liberal candidate. And the conservative wing are very, very strong in Iran, obviously. But this guy got elected, and eventually, when they went, it was very surprising that he got elected because the whole kind of establishment was against him. And people asked, why did you vote for him? Because Iran may be a theocracy, but it's a democracy. You have votes. So they voted for him, and they said, "So, why did you vote for him?" And they said, "Because in all his election posters, he was smiling. He was smiling. None of the other candidates would smile. Have you seen old time pictures? You know, the oldie time picture like World War One and all that stuff. All the guys, how are they standing? You've got to be solemn, right? But the Prophet ﷺ was relaxed, and so his companions were relaxed, and that thread has persisted in our religion. Yeah. But he disliked frivolity. Right? He wasn't a stand-up comedian. Okay? And he said, I have nothing to do with foolish people and they have nothing to do with me. I'm not one of the people of frivolity and silliness. And they are not from me. Okay? Now, so, there are lots of stories. Okay, I won't go into them. But if his companions were talking about worldly affairs, he would do the same. He was mostly silent. Why? Because you can imagine how easy it would be in company for the Prophet ﷺ to overpower the conversation. Right? If the Prophet ﷺ goes out to talk, what's going to happen? That is just a conversation killer. Yeah? You understand what I mean by that, right? Do you understand what I mean? Right? Imagine I was with young Mufti yesterday. I was with a young Mufti yesterday, yeah, and he said that, and he was saying that he was with some young kids, and so forth, and he was sitting there with them, and he says now he's young, he's sort of 30s, in his 30s, and he's saying, but I thought to myself, oh my God, I've become the old Maulvi Sahib, you know, because I'm sitting there, and there's these kids, 14, 15-year-old kids, and they're just sitting quietly, yeah, and so he's sitting there, and he walked in, and this conversation just ended. All conversations ended, and Mufti Sahib is here. Right? And he said, yeah, I need to go to the gym later. And they all kind of went, huh? Maulvi Sahib goes to the gym. Maulvi Sahib, you go to the gym? He says, yes, what do you do? He said, I do Thai boxing. Huh? Maulvi Sahib, you do Thai boxing? Oh, awesome. And then they all started to talk about their favorite kicks and their favorite punches and this and what belt they were and so on and so forth. What's happened? And he said, then I just sat back and relaxed. He gave them permission to talk about something they wanted to talk about. Then he just let them carry on. Now, had he said, yes, but I think actually Wing Chun karate is better than that, they was, oh yes, Mufti Sahib, of course. That's how you are with the Mufti Sahib, right? Now, you can't have a conversation with a sheikh. You have a dars with a sheikh. You have a class with a sheikh, right? So that is why what is the great wisdom behind the Prophet ﷺ being largely silent. He would be with them. He would participate with his body language, his, nods and smiles and so forth, but he would just let them talk about what they wanted to talk about. Okay? So he would play games. You all know these things, I'm sure. Race with his family in the marketplace. The famous story of Sayyidah Aisha. And this tells you something about. So when the Prophet married Sayyidah Aisha, he wants, and this was probably, we're not sure, but probably when he was still in Mecca. Because the actual nikah contract took place in Mecca. They only started living together in Medina. But anyway, so he is playing, he's messing with Aisha. He said, I'll race you. And so they have a race to, to somewhere. And now the Prophet ﷺ is, sort of in his 50s. Say that Aisha is a teenager, that sort of age, whatever, yeah? And he beats her, because of course he beats, because he's a grown man, right? So he beats her, right? And then all know this story, I'm assuming, right? That he had a race with Sayyidah Aisha in the marketplace. No. Oh, sorry, she beats him. Sorry, so she beat him. So you're quite right. She beat him the first time round. Okay, and then the second time round. By this time, this is much later on in the Medina period. So that Aisha had put on some weight, right? So now they race again. Now, bear in mind here, the Prophet ﷺ must have been about 60 years old, right? And just think about that for a second. Think about your granddad. Think about your granddad. Now, I can think about this. My 60-year-old father, or you're playing horses with my children. Yeah, and not just when we're on our own. And I mean, my dad will do it like in the zikr room. He will just, in his kurta, go down on his hands and knees, stick one, this is when, when the kids were young, take one of the kids, stick it on his back and just go around like a horse with them. Yeah, that sort of thing. Okay, so it's maybe not that for me to, yeah, for me to be to think about, but just think about that. He is the messenger of God. You want to finish? Okay, so, so they race again. The Prophet say to her when he beats her, "This is for that." What does that mean? It means that the Prophet ﷺ remembered. He remembered that incident, that occasion. He remembered how happy Sayyidah Aisha got. And when he did it again, all right, then this is reminiscing. He was reminiscing with her. Yeah? Now, as you know, how do you feel when someone says, "Oh, do you remember?" Yeah? And this is someone, again, this is not the relationship between the Prophet and Sayyidah Aisha is not an equal relationship. He's the messenger of God. She would call him Rasulullah. She would call him Muhammad. She would call him Habib. Yeah, she would call him Rasulullah. He was the messenger of God. Okay, how when someone in a position like that, he is her husband, but he is also her prophet. Now, when someone in that kind of a situation says, "Oh, do you remember 10 years ago when we were doing this and that?" and you think to yourself, he's got a relationship with so many people, but he remembers that time, at that time. How, again, it's about how special it makes you feel. And this is how the Prophet was. Okay? There's much more we can talk about, but time is up. And the rest of it you can have a look through. I'll just read the last, the last slide, because in the context of all of this, bear in mind, and stateliness of the Prophet ﷺ. He wasn't a joker. He wasn't a joker. He wasn't just an ordinary person. He had a presence. He had a presence about him. And this is something that is very important to understand. He was naturally possessed of dignity, stateliness, and eminence. And this did not come, if you look at kings and nobles, how is it that they create the queen? The queen may be a bad example, but how does the queen create that kind of majesty and stuff? Well, there's trumpets, and there's carriages, and that she's preceded by soldiers on horseback, by soldiers on horseback, and there are flags, and there's a big crown, and there's a throne that's high up. What's all that stuff for? That's all theatrics. A lot of respect and so forth is theatrics. Yeah, there's a reason that you would stand behind a podium and speak. Yeah, there's a reason the podium is raised. There's a reason that when the U.S. president is speaking, they frame it in a particular way. It's all to create a particular atmosphere that this is a person who needs to be taken seriously. This is a person for whom you have to have reverence. Yeah. So the way that these things would work in the old days is that the door to the throne room of a king would only be about that high off the ground. Why? So that when you entered it, you had to enter bowing. You had to enter bowing, unless you were very short, of course. All right? Yeah. Imam Baqilani was sent. He was a great theologian. He was sent as an ambassador to a place like this, and you had to actually crawl in you had to go into the throne room. The first person enters the king. King goes in on his hands and knees. King goes in. Then he sits then he's got the big throne room. He sits on the throne room. Everyone else who comes in prostrating to the king. Yeah, it's put you in your place right from the word go. What does Imam Baqilani do when he sees this? He goes in backwards. He goes in backwards. Yeah, rear end first. Breech delivery, basically. And that's how he enters. All right? So The Prophet ﷺ, however, had none of those theatrics. That was just his presence. And this is something that is very difficult to explain to you if you haven't experienced, if you have not experienced a charismatic presence. Because a charismatic presence will you can just sense it a mile off. And I've been in the presence of people that you just you enter into their presence and the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. There is just this magnetic, there's something magnetic about it. The Prophet, this is an inheritance from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can you imagine what the presence of the Prophet sallallahu was like? Yeah. Now this is the person who would joke with his companions. This is the person who would run in the streets with Sayyidah Aisha. This is the person who would deflect Sayyidina Anas from problems. This is the person that the wives of the Prophet were addressing in that manner. This person of tremendous bearing, of tremendous dignity and stateliness. Many of the companions were unable to look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. I kept the company of the Prophet ﷺ for many years. I memorized thousands of his hadiths. Despite this, I never looked at his face once directly, out of shyness and reverence before him. There was another Sahaba who used to describe the Prophet ﷺ, but he says, I'm only giving this description from before I became a Muslim. Once I became a Muslim, from that day, I never raised my eyes to meet the gaze of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, so this was this person of tremendous dignity and presence, but yet would make people feel so special, would make people feel so worthy, right? And that is in a nutshell, what we've covered here is the beautiful character. This is an overview. We're going to look at specific aspects as we go through, but this is an overview of the character of the Prophet ﷺ. And what you see is a complete human being. As I think Shaykh Hamza Yusuf put it once, he is the fulfillment of human potential. And we'll leave it at that, inshallah. I'm sorry we kept you long today. I apologize. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم everyone. See you next week. Assalamu alaikum.